Okay, I have 7 o'clock, so I'm gonna go ahead and call to order this meeting of the 5th of November, 2020 City National Planning Board. Linda, could I get you to do a roll call, please?
Sure. Mike Peterson? Mike Peterson?
I can see him there.
He's here.
Present.
And are you alone, or is there anybody in the room with you?
Alone.
Scott Leclerc?
Present and alone.
Adam Barley?
Here and alone.
Ed Weber?
Here and alone.
Alderman David Tenza? Alderwoman Jan Schmidt? Dan Hudson?
Present and alone.
Maggie Harper?
Here and alone.
Bob Bollinger?
Here and alone.
And Larry Hirsch?
Here and alone.
Okay, and we have a quorum.
Okay. So I'm going to go through a few things before the procedure here. We have the minutes in front of us from actually 2 meetings on October 22nd, 2020. For the board members, there was the special meeting as well as the regular meeting. So anybody had a chance to, we'll start with the special meeting. Has anybody a chance to review that set of minutes and want to make a motion as to whether they're ready to accept as written or whether we need to amend them?
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Bob.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the minutes of the October 22nd, 2020 special meeting of the City Planning Board.
Okay. One thing, Bob, I wouldn't mind passing along. I think that meeting started at 6:30.
Oh, yes, Mr. Chair, you are correct. My
Would you
bad, I
wanna
did not
amend
notice
that?
that. But
You could, yeah. Would you want to amend your motion to add
yes,
that?
yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Would like to make a motion to accept the minutes of the special Nashua City Planning Board meeting of October 22nd, 2020, with one revision that the meeting started at 6:30 p.m.
Great. So we have that motion by Mr. Bollinger to accept with that one amendment to it. Anybody want to make a second on that?
Weber, second.
Second by Mr. Weber. Any further discussion on it? Can we get a roll vote on that, please?
Mike Peterson?
I was not present at that meeting.
Okay. Scott Leclerc?
Yes.
Adam Barley?
Yes.
Ed Weber?
Yes.
Dan Hudson?
Abstain.
Maggie Harper?
Abstain.
Bob Bollinger?
Yes.
Larry Hirsch?
Abstain.
And that motion passes 4-0.
Okay, thanks. Now we have the minutes from the regular meeting on October 22nd, 2020. Does anybody want to make a motion as to whether those are ready to be accepted as written or need any changes to them? Mr. Hudson?
I had some changes. Would you like me to make a motion first, or?
Yeah, you can make the motion to, if the changes are they small enough, you can just say them through. Yeah,
All right, well,
go ahead.
I'll make a motion after I describe what it is quickly here.
Yep.
On page 18, halfway down the page, it said Mr. Hudson led a brief discussion regarding, it says the sidewalk contribution, but that was a traffic corridor contribution.
Okay, so
That edit will be part of my motion. And then I just wanted to clarify on page 19, stipulation 12, it may be drafted as it was moved, I recall, but I just wanted to clarify that the intent of the contribution was, it says for offsite improvements, it was to be made to the DW Highway Traffic Corridor Mitigation Account.
okay.
So I don't know if that should be an amendment or if that.
Yeah, I think you can, that's a correct comment. I remember that.
Okay. So hopefully everybody heard those without repeating them. I'll move that the minutes from the October 22nd meeting be approved with those modifications.
Okay, so we have that motion by Mr. Hudson to approve the minutes of the October 22nd, 2020 Planning Board meeting with the two modifications proposed. Do we have a second on that?
Second,
Second.
Mr. Chair?
Second by Mr. Ballinger. Any further discussion? Could we get a roll vote on that, please?
Mike Peterson,
Yes.
Scott Leclair,
Yes.
Adam Barley,
Yes.
Ed Weber,
Yes.
Dan Hudson,
Yes.
Maggie Harper,
Yes.
Bob Ballinger,
Yes.
and Larry Hirsch.
Yes.
And that motion passes 8-0.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and read the introductory statement now. So I'm Scott Leclair, Chair of the City of Nashua Planning Board. And again, this is the 5th of November, 2020 Planning Board meeting. As Chair of the Planning Board, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by Governor Sununu as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and in accordance with the Governor's Emergency Order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note there's no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized to meet electronically pursuant to the Governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, I am confirming that we are, number one, providing public access to the meeting by telephone with additional access possibilities by video or other electronic means. Specifically, we're video conferencing utilizing Zoom. Public access to the meeting is provided via Zoom, and a link to the meeting is contained within the meeting agenda available at the city's website. The meeting can also be streamed to the city's website at www.nashuanh.gov/318/CTV on Nashua's community link, and the public may also view the meeting on Comcast channel 16. Number two, providing public notice and necessary information for accessing the meeting. Number three, if anyone has a problem accessing the meeting, please go ahead and call 603-589-3115. They'll help you connect. Four, in the event of the public is unable to access this meeting via the methods I've mentioned, then the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. I'm in control of the meeting, and to the extent practical and advisable, the board will follow the procedures as identified in its bylaws. The applicant will first present the applicant's case, followed by questions by the board. We will allow for a rebuttal period as best as possible for persons wishing to speak in favor or with questions or opposition before the board deliberates and determines an outcome. Applicants and their representatives and individuals required to appear before this board are appearing remotely. They are not required to be physically present. Applicants, their representatives, and individuals required to appear before the board may contact the planning department to arrange an alternative means of real-time participation if they're unable to use Zoom. Please note that all votes taken during this meeting will be done by a roll call vote. The planning board meetings will continue to be held electronically until it's been deemed safe to conduct more typical meetings at City Hall. The board, the planning department, and city staff thanks everybody for their understandings and patience during this time. Okay, so on to communications. Linda or Matt? Who's doing that?
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the board. I will quickly go through the items that were emailed to you after the packets went out. Today, you should have received an email from me with a letter from Doria Brown, the city's energy manager, in support of the solar arrays. Next, we have an amended agenda. Then we have regarding case number 1, the Pennachuck Middle School, we have additional traffic information. Then we have regarding case number 4, 18 and 20 Dumaine Ave. They're asking to go on the November 19th meeting instead of tonight so they can work with engineering on resolving some issues.
Yeah.
Then we have case number 4, the Pennachuck solar project. We have engineering comments that were sent out on November 2nd. And then we have some emails from butters, a James Pyle and a Joan Ashley regarding the solar project.
Mhm.
And then finally, we have a map in regards to other business number 3. It's the regards to the acquisition of land at 36 Buck Meadow Road. And that is all.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Chair, if I may, just quickly,
Go ahead. Yep,
I just wanted to
sure.
point out that within the Pennachuck Middle School traffic documentation, just that one of the memos that's included was actually received by the board as part of a packet precedent to this. We just wanted to include it for reference, and that's the 26-page document that you see after the November dated memo. So I just want to make sure that you're aware that you've had this memo in your packet before.
Yep, okay, thanks. Okay, report of chairman, committee and liaison. Ed, any committee reports?
Nothing to report. No meetings.
Okay. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and move on with the agenda. Starting with old business conditional special use permits, there are none. Old business subdivision plans, there are none. Old business site plan, this is case number 1, City of Nashua owner, proposed site plan amendment to Pennachuck Middle School to construct additions, complete various renovations, upgrade the existing school layout. This property is located at 207 Manchester Street. This was tabled from October 5th, 2020 meeting. So I think to start this up, first need to have a motion to remove it from the table. And does anybody want to make that motion?
So moved.
All right, so a motion, was that Mr. Peterson? Yeah,
Yes.
okay, so a motion to remove it from the table for Mr. Peterson. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Varley. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Bollinger. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just noticing from the date of the emails, it looks like staff only received the updated engineering report yesterday. And I guess maybe I'll defer to Mr. Hudson. Has engineering had sufficient and ample opportunity to review and provide comments on the new material? I guess I don't mind if Pennachuck wishes to maybe go over some salient points, but if we haven't had time for engineering to sufficiently digest this in the last 36 hours, I would be somewhat hesitant to offer a formal vote on the matter, to be honest with you. But I will defer to Mr. Hudson. Thank you.
Yeah, Dan, do you want to make a comment on that?
Sure, Mr. Chair. Yeah, we did receive some additional information on Tuesday, which was city holiday, but the information was fairly brief in nature, so we did get an opportunity to review it. We did not submit comments because it's so close to the meeting, and also we understand the applicant's traffic engineer is attending tonight and can speak to the content.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay. Can we get a roll vote on taking it off the table?
Mike Peterson,
Yes.
Scott Leclaire,
Yes.
Adam Varley,
Yes.
Ed Weber,
Yes.
Dan Hudson,
Yes.
Maggie Harper,
Yes.
Bob Bollinger,
Yes.
Larry Hirsch.
Yes.
And that motion passes 8-0.
Okay, and I can't remember, were we in the, I think we were in the meeting, so do we have to reopen the hearing, Mr. Farley, is that correct? I believe so, right?
Yes.
Oh, you're on mute.
Yes, I believe we closed the hearing, so we should reopen it so we can hear from the applicant.
Okay, can I get a motion from somebody to reopen the hearing?
I'll
To hear
make
from the. Okay, so we have that motion to reopen the hearing by Mr. Varley. There was a second on that.
Second.
Second by Mr. Weber. Any further discussion? Let's get a vote on that, please.
Mike Peterson,
Yes.
Scott Leclaire,
Yes.
Adam Varley,
Yes.
Ed Weber,
Yes.
Dan Hudson,
Yes.
Maggie Harper,
Yes.
Bob Bollinger,
Yes.
Larry Hirsch.
Yes.
That motion passes 8-0.
Okay, so we have the hearing open again, and so someone from the applicant want to present sort of the new information and follow up from the last meeting.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Jamie Willett with Harriman Architects and Engineers. I will actually share my screen.
Sure.
I can find the right button here. All right. So I'm going to walk through kind of some of the material that we've already shared, and then I will move on to some additional information that was kind of requested at the last planning meeting that we attended.
Sure.
The project is at Pennachuck Middle School. The Nashua School District has 3 middle schools, and the Elm Street School is slated to be closed once the completion of a new middle school to later be reviewed is complete. In part of that transition, the Pennachuck Middle School will be taking on some additional students and also removing some existing modulars. And in order to accommodate those additional students and the modulars, we intend to or propose to add some classroom additions onto the existing building. What you're seeing here is the actual existing survey. And so this is the layout for the existing school. You can see a couple of existing modulars here. Those are the 2 modulars that will be going away once the new additions are completed. Manchester Street is here off to your left. And right now there's 1 entrance onto the property through that intersection at Manchester Street. And there's bus traffic and parent traffic both comes into the school through this intersection. The parents, I'll kind of give the loop of what happens now, and then I'll present what we're proposing for the future.
Yeah, and you
Right
can go
now-
quick through some of the summary because I think,
You're pretty
this
familiar
was
with it?
presented
Okay.
the last time, so.
Okay, great. Well, so parent loop comes in and comes around the building, drops off, and then leaves through that same intersection. Buses come in, drop off, and come out that same intersection. Moving to the new proposed site plan. We're proposing to flip that for safety reasons and kind of protocol reasons to the school. So now buses can come from the south off of Manchester and enter onto a secondary entrance, which can be utilized as strictly for buses and for emergency vehicles as a secondary entrance to the site. They'll come around, they'll drop off at the bus back entrance here, come around, and then come to this intersection here. Signalization will bring them out to this intersection. Signalization, and then again, proposed signalization would again allow them to go north or south as they intend to go. Coming from the north, the buses would also come down. They'd come into the site. They'd loop around that same loop, and then come out that same way. Parents both would come from north and south through this main intersection. They'd pull into at drop off. They come in, they drop off and loop around and come out the site. Stop at an intersection here, and then when they get to when they're signaled to go, they come to the intersection up ahead and move to whatever direction is intended to proceed, or whatever they intend to proceed. And then there's additional queuing lane here. This is one of the items that was requested and wanted to be reviewed at that last meeting. And we reviewed that with the school district and the traffic engineer, and it made perfect sense with counts and observations that were done for pickup time, that there's a queuing lane so that people could bypass them and bypass the people waiting for the school to let out, and then coming into the parking lot or whatnot as they intend to do. And then they would loop around and come out the same way, like as suggested before. Additionally, I think there was I'll zoom in a little bit here. It's probably hard to see my screen. There was a comment that we did receive. I wanted to make sure that we noted that we added a containment around the dumpster pad. with fencing as requested in the previous meeting. And then one of the other topics that we were talking about was at the last planning board meeting was the signalization here and whether that was warranted or not. Giles is on the call here and can talk a little bit about what that means.
Sure.
Giles?
Yes, that's my cue. Good evening, Giles Ham with Vanessa and Associates. Just by way of a little bit of background, so in June of 2019, VII was retained by the City of Nashua to look at several school alternatives within the community, and obviously this school was one of those schools we look at. So I personally have been out to the school on several occasions, and that was again back in June of 2019. We've conducted a series of traffic counts at the school, and we made a number of recommendations to improve safety conditions in the area, particularly for the children crossing Manchester Street. So at this location, we made a number of recommendations really to upgrade all the school signage in the area along Manchester Street to establish the school zone and to the end of the school zone. Again, as Jamie alluded to, we're separating the bus traffic with the drop-off traffic and the pickup area, so that's appropriate and typical for schools like this. And then finally, we've recommended signalization of the school driveway. And a lot of that was in the 26-page document that Matt alluded. That was the earlier document that you've had. Subsequent to the last meeting and the memo that you've got this week is we've updated the signal warrant analysis at that location. And I can probably get into as much detail as you want, but essentially there's 9 warrants, but the one we looked at here in particular was what's called the school crossing warrant. And for a school crossing warrant, you need to establish a couple things. You need to have at least 20 school children crossings over an hour, which we meet that. Our crossings are between 21 and 34 crossings in a 1 hour period. And then there has to be really what's called is not enough gaps in the traffic flow stream for the children to cross safely within that 30-minute period, which is the peak for the school entering and exiting pedestrian traffic. So that is established. We meet that warrant, and basically, based upon our engineering study and my professional opinion, it does meet a warrant here. We will install a traffic signal here pending our approvals. We will start to move forward with the design of this signal, which is really the detail of the traffic signal locations and the timings and the phasing as well. So, and as Jamie alluded to, we will signalize the driveway at Manchester Street and the internal driveway to control the flow and alternate the flow between the buses and the vehicular traffic. So that's really a brief summary. Again, with detailed engineering study, the signal is warranted. We feel that this will provide safe conditions for the children crossing the street. And that's really a brief summary of what we've done.
Okay. Can you talk about the crosswalk and the construction? So that's, I can see it on the left side of the plan. And what's the intention of, are there walk buttons or what's the control concept there?
Yeah, so the signal itself will be fully actuated. That means when there's a demand on the street or a turn lane, that'll call the traffic there. And certainly the crosswalk there will be pedestrian push button. So you push a button, it stops all the traffic, and then there's a safe crossing. So what's different when you look at this plan here and came up with our staff discussion, maybe a week and a half, probably was last week, I guess, that right turn lane, we're probably going to take that right turn lane out. We've looked at that. And what that allows us to do is to reduce the crossing width of the children. So that right turn lane is probably going to come out. It's a 40-foot crossing with that right turn lane out. We're going to have at least 16 seconds for the crossing, for safe crossing. And that's based upon studies in terms of the width of the crossing and the time people travel, feet per second, as well as a startup time and then a time to accommodate that there'll be more than one student crossing at the same time. So yes, pedestrian actuated.
Okay. And again, can you scroll down the page a little bit? So the right turn, you feel that can go away because
So not that
Why?
right turn lane. So the right turn lane
the
up,
upper one, right?
that one is eliminated, will probably be eliminated. Again, we haven't done the design yet, but we've done enough look at that to think we're probably going to take that away. The other lane is just for the buses only. The buses come
right.
in there and they loop around, and we think that's a good idea.
Okay. All right. And the reason the right turn lane would go away is more to do with shortening the crossing
Right.
distance and time.
Right, and that was a suggestion of city staff, and it was actually a very good suggestion. We had a good dialogue with staff about the proposal here, and the concern is that we need to time the signal such that traffic doesn't back up to Route 3. And keep in mind, with any school project like this, we're really looking at a peak, 20 to 30 minute period that we need to handle this traffic and process it in and out. As with any middle school, any school project, you're still going to have a level of, you have a large peaking, and you'll have some queuing on site and queuing to exit, and that's typical with any school project. And as you've seen on this plan, we've modified the on-site queue storage to adequately accommodate the parents. And what happens here is it's the longest time, the peak time when you have the queues there in the afternoon, where the parents arrive early and park and wait for their children to get out of school. It's also important when we have a project like this that the school, when this new change is opened up, there should be some correspondence to parents and caretakers to update them on how we expect them to behave and the procedures for entering and actually exiting the school safely. That's typically done prior to you open up a school like this.
Okay, thanks. All right. Anything else you want to present before I open up the board questions, or? All set?
I'm all set, Mr. Chair. Sorry. Would you
Okay.
like me to close my session here?
I think you can leave it up for the board part. They might want to reference it. That's okay.
Okay.
They're pretty good at speaking out. So anybody from the board who wants to ask some questions, go ahead.
Weber?
Go ahead, Weber. Yeah.
Couple of questions. One, the queuing lane for people to drop off and pick up. Have you, excuse me, have you figured out that this is sufficient for the amount of traffic that you've had?
Yes, so when I was out there in June of 2019, that was, one of the things I look at as the queue. So currently, or in 2019, the queuing is in the back of the school, and they double stack to pick up and drop off, or to pick up, I should say. So we've looked at that distance and that queue, and we've accounted for the fact that the school population is going to increase. So we think that that's adequately sized appropriately.
Okay, also, have you, are you going to be putting no parking signs on the queuing area that only pick up cars?
That would make sense. Yes, that would make sense.
Is there, on the inside the school area, there's a crosswalk there. Is that also going to be so that pedestrian, students don't interfere, or with the busing traffic turning, coming in, coming out?
I'm sorry, what's your question again with regard to that?
Right where you're,
Yeah.
right where you're at, is that just going to be no lit, no queuing, nobody pushing a button? They're just going to be able to cross when it's clear?
We really haven't gotten to that detail yet. It's certainly we could put a pedestrian signal there that would maybe make sense. Keep in mind that exiting traffic there is going to be school buses, and you have about 11 school buses today. So that's going to, increase with the expanded school. The other thing I would tell you, it was a good point, is where we have the queuing area, typically we'll put signs like parents can't leave your car, because what we don't want to do is have them sit there and park their car and then walk in, and then it doesn't work. So
Right.
there'll be appropriate signage to make sure this works correctly and fluidly. And like I said, a real key is to get some correspondence out to the parents and say, this is the new school. This is how we operate. This is how we expect you to operate to make this work well and safe for the school children.
Okay, and the next one, I see a lot of arrows and, directional arrows and things like that. Will these be thermal painted so that in a few years they're not gone?
We can review that with the school. I don't know if it's been decided officially yet, but we can review that with the school district as a good option to include there.
Okay. The reason I was concerned about the queuing is so that people aren't going across the street and parking across the street waiting for entrance area. That's why the queuing is important to be the length that it is. That's it.
Other questions from the board?
I have one.
Go ahead, Mr. Peterson.
The right turning lane that will be removed for vehicles heading north, will those vehicles still be able to make a right turn into the school with that lane missing?
Oh, absolutely. It's just that they will, so that lane will basically be a through and a right turn lane. And again, it really, it's a matter of safety and reducing the crossing width. And I think that was a good suggestion by city staff.
Okay, thank you.
Just to clarify, do you think that the, is the right turn in there, would that be a no right on red, or would it, I guess you could, what would you, maybe you haven't got that far yet, but.
Yeah, we haven't really, this is just kind of
concept.
we're just getting back on board, quite frankly, with the project. Yeah. And so, we were asked to kind of pick up from the last meeting and help you with your questions this evening. And then subsequent to an approval by this board, we would get into the real design detail of the specifics in terms of the signage and the where the mast arms are going, the pedestrian signal heads, the pedestrian timings, how long when you press the button, and all those things. Are a lot of detail, a lot of design that's really subsequent to this effort.
Okay. Other questions by the board?
Weber again, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mr. Weber.
With this one lane only, emergency vehicles, if something happened during this time period, has this been talked over with the fire marshal at all?
Yeah, early on in the project, we had, when we actually, during concept design, we had a meeting with the fire marshal and police. And this was actually a push from them as well. It was something that two entrances to this site was strongly desired. So the answer to your question is yes.
Okay. And Jamie, one other thing that I think you might, just to make sure I'm reading it right, that you did make a change, that center parking island that's in the drop-off area, that's like one way in, one way out now?
Yes. Oh, yes, that's right. We flipped the arrows here because parents were coming in through here. It made sense to have this as a one-way so that people weren't trying to kind of loop back into that same drop-off area. So if they were just coming out and everybody was coming out that same direction, that made sense. I should also mention that we did notice that our previous submission that you would have seen before this, this arrow was flipped as a one-way as well, and that's not intentional. It's supposed to be just like you see here. It's a two-way traffic for the buses coming from the north. They'd be able to come in and come onto site because they can't obviously make that turn that you see down below there.
Yep. Okay. Any other questions by the board? You can probably stop sharing. Jamie.
Okay, sure.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Mr. Bollinger. Yep.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to clarify, we went from one hypothetical signal, I think at the last meeting, now we're talking about installation of 2 signals. Is there any idea of the anticipated cost of, even if it's a ballpark, roughly the cost of installing 2 signals at this location?
The cost is part of the school project budget. The cost to install the signals are.
Well, okay, but like, what do dollars, how much are 2 signals eating out of the overall budget? Is it 200,000, 500,000? I'm just trying to understand, because the premise of the question is, I believe Mr. Ham gave testimony to the fact that this is really only going to be needed for maybe about a half an hour in the morning and a half an hour in the afternoon. And I'm trying to figure out, at least on the main line, the internal, let's set aside the internal signal for a moment, the one actually on school premises in the public right of way. I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around the fact that we're going to have a signal that basically does very little for 23 hours of the day. And I would just like to point out, I don't have any issues with the analysis that was provided, but there is some very specific language within the guidance document for installing signals, which in essence says, just because you meet the warrant doesn't mean you have to install the signal. So I guess I'm trying to figure out what real benefit is there beyond those 60 minutes out of the day. And what happens the other 23? Are you going to put it in flash? There was testimony given at the last hearing on this project that it was impossible or nearly impossible to hire a crossing guard. That may be true, but I guess, has there been any further discussion with fire or specifically police? Would it make more sense to ask a police officer to stand out there for 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes in the afternoon, rather than potentially spending hundreds of thousands of dollars in infrastructure and having recurring maintenance costs associated with the upkeep of those signals for something that's going, at most 1 hour a day, 5 days a week, not more than 9 months out of the year? That was quite a loaded question or questions, but those are some of the general questions and concerns that I have about originally 1, but now 2 traffic signals at this location.
Mr. Chairman?
If I can I start with that?
Sure, go ahead. Sure. Yeah, make sure
Great.
you state your name too when you're speaking.
Yeah,
just so that
again,
we're remembering.
okay, again, Giles Ham with Vanessa and Associates. So just a couple things is that back to our 2019 memo, we've always talked about it being signal at Manchester Street and signal at the internal driveway. So that's not new. And if it was presented incorrectly or was implied that something different, that was not the case. It's always been the case that there'll be 2 signals. And keep in mind that you're still going to have 1 controller, so it's not twice the cost. So that was always contemplated. And I'll be honest, I don't have a cost estimate. We've not done a detailed cost estimate for the signal. And again, it's warranted. We've done the engineering study. We've stamped our letter. We're going to stamp the plans. We feel it's required and it's safe for the crossing. In terms of the 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes in the afternoon, that's when it peaks. But if a child's going to school late or is leaving, after the school hours or after school programs, there'll always be the pedestrian signal there to press and cross Manchester Street safely. So, if you put an officer out there, a control guard, they're not going to be there during the whole school day. So again, we think it's necessary. I think that staff concurs with that recommendation. In terms of the signal itself, it will not be put on flash. Staff agrees with us. We're recommending that once you put the signal in, it stays on. It doesn't go on flash at all because, over the course of the day or weekends, there'll be kids crossing and going to the school, and the pedestrian signal is warranted and it's a safe means for the children to cross safely. So we've looked at, Bob had a lot of great comments, and we've thought of those. We've discussed those with staff, and I appreciate the comments.
Alderman
Mr.
Dowd,
Chair,
did you have-
if I may just ask a follow-up, and I'll just put it out there hypothetically, would not a hybrid beacon or something else that effectively just allows safe crossing be as effective here? And I guess I appreciate Mr. Ham's commentary and testimony. I'm just struggling a little bit with the concept of, particularly after hours or off peak hours, having the full, red, yellow, green assembly at an intersection that quite honestly didn't satisfy any of the volume criteria for warrant analysis. It's really the school crossing. And if it's really a crossing, this board has approved pedestrian hybrid beacons or other alternative crossing methods for probably much busier roads than this. And I'm just trying to see if that was investigated as a possible alternative. And go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So again, Giles Ham with Vanessa. So we did look at that and a couple things. We're trying to do two things. We're trying to process the children safely, but we also need to get the peak traffic in and out of the school. And when I was out there in June, for whatever reason, there was no crossing guard. There was no police control. I think that's been a problem in the past. So we felt that this was the best remedy, and it's a permanent solution. And I know sometimes with some of the other school projects that I have, sometimes the crossing guard doesn't show up, or the officer has to go to something else, and they're left with no control. So we've thought of all the alternatives, and I do understand there's a cost associated with this. We think this is best, and we think it meets the warrants. And just in terms of the warrants itself, there are 9 warrants. We looked at 3, which is the peak hour warrant, the pedestrian warrant, and the school crossing warrant. We are borderline meeting the peak hour warrant. And not to get to a lot of detail, but we did do a speed study out here, and the speeds are 37 miles an hour where we're going, but some are going faster than that. If the speed was 40 miles an hour, just 3 miles an hour greater, we would definitely meet that warrant. In terms of the volume, we're also very, very close. So it's borderline on the volume warrant. It's almost there. And those are all the things that we looked at and factored into our analysis and our decision to implement this change.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, good.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Has there been, and again, this may be too early on in the process, but has there been any coordination with New Hampshire DOT? They maintain the signal at Henry Burke Highway. You're only about 500 feet offset from that, and there is the potential for some Q spillback from the school signal, proposed school signal. I was trying to understand if there was any communication with the state as to potential impact on their infrastructure, and I would imagine that the state who maintains Henry Burke would not want to see any Q spillback from the school site affecting their highway.
Right. So again, Giles Ham with Vanessa and Associates. So we have reached out to New Hampshire DOT at the district level. We will be coordinating with them, and I think the point is well taken. And same with us, the New Hampshire DOT as well as we don't want any spillback. So there are ways of mitigating that. There's Q detectors or in the timing that we'll look at very carefully. And again, there is a real spike of traffic whenever you have a school like this. So I would anticipate, we're going to go through the whole design plan. We're going to be coming up with detailed signal timing, but probably when they open up, we'll be out there those days watching this and making sure if we have to tweak that timing, we'll be doing that. So in terms of the coordination, that's to be determined whether the state will want that coordinated with a signal or not.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ham. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yep. Alderman Dowd, did you have something to add to?
Yeah, Alderman Dowd, Chairman of the Joint Special School Building Committee and Ward 2 Alderman. I can tell you that the traffic on that intersection is very fast many times of the day, because I've been there trying to cross the street and they don't want to stop for you. And if it's a child, it's really dangerous. And the neighbors also are in favor of it as well at the last meeting, because they have a problem crossing the intersection. And most of the times of the day, it's a speed issue. But also, the school's not used for only 8 hours a day. They have activities at night, during the day. There are other activities on the weekend. The public get to use all those fields back there. And there could be 100, 150 cars at some of those events. So it's used quite frequently because of all the athletic fields that are available, and tennis courts and basketball courts for the general public. So getting in and out of the site can be an issue more than just in the morning and the afternoon. Plus, the teachers don't leave right after school. They filter out till sometimes 6 o'clock at night. So the other piece of that is I'm going to be working with Dan Hudson and BPW to make sure that we're covered on any high use spares. And I can tell you that we fully priced out the cost of the intersection, and it's in our budget. And there is no issue with cost. The cost is coming out of the bond. It's not anything that has to come out of the DPW budget.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hudson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just, reiterate that we did meet with Alderman Dowd and the applicant and their engineer. And we asked many of the same questions that Mr. Bollinger did tonight. And it's our understanding and feeling that, of the various alternatives that could be considered, that this is the appropriate one based upon, all those factors, and particularly the pedestrian safety aspect. So Public Works Division is in support of this concept, and we'll continue to work out all the details on the design and, the timings and all those things to address those concerns that have been noted.
Just one other thing relative to having a policeman there. First of all, we're short in Nashua of police officers, especially short right now with some of them with COVID. But I have had several conversations with the chief of police. There's no way you're ever going to get a police officer directing traffic there. If you notice a lot of the construction sites around Nashua, you'll see that it's not Nashua police officers. It's Milford, Hollis, because we don't have officers to fill those slots. So the possibility of having a police officer there is nil to none.
Thank you, Alderman. Anybody else from the board have any questions for the applicant? Okay, I'm not seeing any. At this point, I will go ahead and open up. I don't know if there's anybody in the public that's listening on that may have a question or comment on the plan. This would be your time to unmute and go ahead and talk. I see one hand. Yep.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. My name is Barbara Halevi, and I live at 83 Ferry Road, which is the corner lot on Ferry Road and Manchester Street. So right across from where the crosswalk is. And I just had a question about, maybe for Mr. Ham, about the traffic signal. I was wondering if there's a plan to put a pedestrian walk button, walk signal, not only on the crossing of Manchester Street, but also on the Ferry Road direction, because there's no sidewalk on my side of the street. So anyone who crosses has to then cross Ferry Road to access the sidewalks to either walk up Manchester Street or up Ferry Road. And we do get a lot of cars at pickup time, especially of parents waiting on Ferry Road for their kids to come out with the walking group. So there's definitely a lot of kid traffic around that Ferry Road cross area, particularly at pickup time of day.
Okay, yeah, we'll pass that along. I try to collect the questions and then I'm sure the applicants listening and we'll have them respond to a bunch of them if there are any
Great,
more.
thanks so much.
Anybody else in the audience wishing to speak in opposition or have a question of the plan? I'm not seeing anybody or any hands up. Okay, so at this point, I guess I give back to the applicant. Can maybe address the question regarding Ferry Road.
Yes, again, Giles Ham with Vanessa and Associates. Yes, thank you for that question. And absolutely. There'll be a pedestrian push button heads and phase for both crosswalks.
Okay, thanks.
Also, I can tell you that there is a school crosswalk right now across Ferry Road. It's not shown on the drawings, which I pointed out. And, but there is a crosswalk there and it will be taken care of so that it's safe travel across that road as well.
Thank you, Alderman. Okay. Any other questions of the applicant by the board while we're in the hearing? Or of staff while we're in the hearing? Okay. I am not seeing any at this point. I will go ahead and yeah, I guess as the applicant, do you have anything else you want to add before I close the hearing?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to go ahead and close the hearing then, move into the meeting. So I guess we've got this application before us. We've seen it before. Looks like they made some changes, obviously based on some of the discussions we had last time. Looks to me like the queuing and the signalization and some of the other sort of directivity on the site has been improved, or at least clarified to the point where I'm pretty comfortable with it, but I welcome anybody else's comments at this time on the board. Mr. Varley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I mean, my recollection of the discussion we had at the last meeting was principally focused on, I think, you know, the uncertainty surrounding those intersections and whether they in fact would be signalized or not, and then how that would affect, you know, the traffic flow. And I think, you know, having Mr. Ham here tonight was incredibly helpful, and to have that plan laid out, to have a better understanding of how that's going to work, I think gave us the clarification, at least that I was looking for. And so I would agree. I feel, you know, comfortable with the plan based on the discussion we've had here tonight.
Okay. Anybody else on the board wishing to make a comment or during the meeting? All right, anybody, Mr. Weber?
Yeah, I appreciate all the new specifics that were put on the drawing since last time. A lot of the questions we had, and really did see all the improvements there that we were requesting. Thank you. And I'm happy with the traffic going what it's doing. So thank you.
Okay. Anybody in the board wishing to make a motion? I would remind folks too that in your staff report there are, and we talked about it already during the last hearing, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 waivers that need to be addressed in the motion as well. Mr. Hudson?
Yeah, I'm not offering to make a motion, but
yeah.
I was looking through the stipulations, and then stipulation number 11, prior to issuance of building permit addressing engineering comments. This is a little bit unique. We have some details to work through still on the off-site improvements. But I believe the on-site work, there's quite a bit of building work and stuff to be done. So I'm not sure we want to hold up the on-site building effort while we work those details out. So I don't know if we should break that into two pieces. You know, one being addressing engineering comments for on-site, and then the second being you know, prior to occupancy, you know, design and construct off-site improvements that, you know, meet the requirements of the engineering department, something to that effect.
Okay, so you would do off-site Repeat that. The offsite improvements would be prior to.
Yeah, maybe
building
prior
permit,
to occupancy, certificate of occupancy. But then,
and on-site would be building permit.
yeah, and of course, there'll be a little bit of overlap with the,
Yeah.
and the internal intersection, but
Yeah.
okay. I think we can handle that.
Okay, thanks. Anybody want to make a motion? Mr. Barley.
Chair.
Mhm.
I'd like to go ahead and make a motion. This is on old business case number 1, City of Nashua, amendment to NR 1405 at 207 Manchester Street. And that motion would be to approve old business number 1, and that approval will be accompanied by a total of 15 stipulations. Oh wait, I'm sorry. I think actually this first might not actually be a stipulation, so I think it actually remains 14 stipulations.
Yep. Okay.
So 14 stipulations, and I would just indicate here as part of the motion, I believe what's listed currently as stipulation 1 is not in fact a stipulation, but it's just a statement about the determination to be made by the planning board.
See that.
So the first 5 stipulations are all waiver requests. Stipulation number 2 for waiver request of 190-279, that will read, is granted, will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulation. Stipulation number 2, request for a waiver for 190-209A1, will read, is granted, will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulation. Stipulation number 3, waiver of 190-184D1, will read, is granted, will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulation. Stipulation 4, being a waiver request from 190-279EE, to read, is granted, will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulation. Stipulation number 5, being waiver request of section 190-193A, reading, is granted, will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulation. What will be stipulations 6, 7, 8, and 9, as written in the staff report. The current stipulation number 10, I'm going to split into 2 new stipulations. The first will read, prior to the issuance of a building permit, all outstanding engineering comments with respect to on-site improvements shall be addressed to the satisfaction of the engineering department. Then there will be a new stipulation number 11, which will read, prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy, design and construction of all off-site improvements will be completed to the satisfaction of the engineering department. And then we'll have stipulations 12, 13, and 14 as renumbered to be as written in the staff report.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Barley. So we have that motion to approve with the stipulations as stated by Mr. Barley. Do we have a second on that?
Second.
Second by Mr. Weber. Any further discussion? Can we get a roll vote on that, please?
Mike Peterson,
Yes.
Scott Leclaire,
Yes.
Adam Barley,
Yes.
Ed Weber,
Yes.
Dan Hudson,
Yes.
Maggie Harper,
Yes.
Bob Ballinger,
Yes.
Larry Hirsch,
Yes.
and that motion passes 8-0.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. All right. Next up, we have new business conditional special use permits. There are none. New business subdivision plan. This is case number 2. Janet R. George's owner, Dana George's applicant. This is an application and acceptance of a proposed 1-year extension for a previously approved subdivision. This property is located at 67 Groton Road. And I'll make note that I'm going to hear this, or we're going to hear this in conjunction with new business site plan case number 3. Same owner, same applicant, same location, again with an acceptance of proposed 1-year extension for previously approved site plan to allow for 4 detached single-family home. So I would first go to the board and say, has anybody had a chance to look at case number 2 and want to make a motion as to whether to take jurisdiction?
So moved.
So a motion to take jurisdiction for new business subdivision plan case number 2 by Mr. Weber. Do we have a second on that?
Second.
Second by Mr. Peterson. Any further discussion? Can we get a roll vote on that, please?
Mike Peterson,
Yes.
Scott Leclaire,
Yes.
Adam Barley,
Yes.
Ed Weber,
Yes.
Dan Hudson,
Yes.
Maggie Harper,
Yes.
Bob Ballinger,
Yes.
Larry Hirsch.
Yes.
That motion passes 8-0.
Okay, thanks. And with regard to new business site plan case number 3, we'll make a motion as to whether to take jurisdiction.
Weber,
So a motion to
I'd like
go ahead,
a
Mr.
motion to take jurisdiction, new business number 3 site plan.
All right, so we have that motion by Mr. Weber. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Peterson. Any further discussion? All right, can we get a roll vote on that, please?
Mike Peterson,
Yes.
Scott Leclaire,
Yes?
Adam Barley,
Yes.
Ed Weber,
Yes.
Dan Hudson,
Yes.
Maggie Harper,
Yes.
Bob Ballinger,
Yes.
Larry Hirsch.
Yes.
And that motion passes 8-0.
Okay, so we have jurisdiction of both new business number 2 and new business number 3. Do we have somebody from the applicant that wants to present these? And I would say go ahead and just present through both of them. And then we'll take questions or afterwards. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Pete Madsen. I'm with Keach Nordstrom Associates in Bedford, New Hampshire. Basically, I have a simple ask of the board tonight. We are looking for a 1-year extension for the site plan, the condominium site plan at 67 Groton Road. The owner had intended to begin construction in the spring. However, the COVID-19 pandemic hit and his plans changed, as did everyone's. So with that being said, I'd like to open it up for any questions. Thank you.
Okay, so no plan changes. All prior conditions of stipulations are still remain acceptable? on
Correct.
Both the subdivision and the site plan?
Correct.
Okay. Anybody from the board have any questions for the applicant? I guess the only question I'd have is there any new update on when you think that is this planning to move forward in the next year? Or?
I'm not entirely sure. I don't want to speak for the applicant, but I would assume if he had intended to be this past spring, it would probably be the upcoming spring.
Okay, thanks. All right, any other questions from the board? Anybody in the audience wishing to speak in opposition or concern or have a question of the plan, either the subdivision or the site plan? Hearing none, I'll give the board one last chance. Any questions of the applicant or staff during the hearing? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to go ahead and close the hearing. Pretty straightforward to me. Just an extension of something we've already approved. No concerns on my end, but I don't know if anybody has any comments or questions they want to talk about during the meeting. If not, I would welcome a motion from somebody.
Weber,
Go ahead, Mr. Weber.
new business number 2 subdivision, owners Janet, George, and Groton Road Trust at 67 Groton Road. That it meets NRO 138G with all prior conditions of approval are incorporated here and to make part of this plan, otherwise determined by the planning board.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve new business number 2 by Mr. Weber. Do we have a second on it?
Second.
Second by Ms. Harper. Any further discussion? Can we get a roll vote on that, please?
Mike Peterson,
Yes.
Scott Leclaire,
Yes.
Adam Barley,
Yes.
Ed Weber,
Yes.
Dan Hudson,
Yes.
Maggie Harper,
yes,
Bob Ballinger,
Yes.
Larry Hirsch.
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0.
Regarding new business number 3, site plan. Mr.
Weber,
Weber?
yes. New business number 3, site plan at 67 Groton Road, that it meets NRO 190, 146D and 190, 23F. And all prior conditions approval incorporated herein and made part of this plan, otherwise determined by the planning board.
Okay, so we have that motion by Mr. Weber to approve new business number 3. Any second on that?
second,
Second by Mr. Peterson. Any further discussion? Okay, can we get a roll vote on that, please?
Peterson,
yes,
Scott Leclair,
Yes.
Adam Barley,
Yes.
Ed Weber,
Yes,
Dan Hudson,
Yes.
Maggie Harper,
yes,
Bob Ballinger,
Yes.
Larry Hirsch.
Yes.
And that motion passes 8-0.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
All right, moving on. As mentioned earlier in the communications, new business site plan number 4 is postponed to our November 19th meeting. New business site plan number 5, Edgestone Properties, Inc. owner, application and acceptance of proposed 1-year extension for previously approved site plan for 25 single-family homes. This property is located at 35 Groton Road. Has anybody had a chance to take a look at this application and want to make a motion as to whether to take jurisdiction?
so moved. Take
Let's do it.
jurisdiction of business 5, site plan 35.
Motion. So we have a motion by Mr. Weber to take jurisdiction of a new business number 5. Do we have a second on that?
second,
Second by Mr. Peterson. Any further discussion? Okay, can we get a roll vote on the jurisdiction?
Mike Peterson,
yes,
Scott Leclair,
Yes.
Adam Barley,
Yes.
Ed Weber,
Yes,
Dan Hudson,
Yes.
Maggie Harper,
yes,
Bob Ballinger,
Yes.
Larry Hirsch.
Yes.
And that motion passes 8-0.
Okay, thanks. Do you have somebody from the applicant who wants to present? Mr. Zajac?
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. For the record, my name is Tom Zajac. I'm a civil engineer with Hayner Swanson, 3 Congress Street here in Nashua. Here tonight representing Edgestone Properties in their project to be known as Terrell Farm, a 25-unit single-family residential development to be located off of Groton Road. The simple request here tonight is a 1-year extension for this project. We were approved in December of last year. As the previous case stated, there's been a lot of uncertainty and changes since that time. Edgestone has also had the good fortune of working through a number of other projects that were currently under construction in town. And so we're seeking a 1-year extension tonight with the plan to break ground this upcoming spring. Thank you.
Thanks. Any questions of the applicant by the board? Okay. Anybody in the audience wishing to speak in opposition or concern or questions of the plan? Okay, seeing none, I'll give the board one last time to ask any questions of the applicant or staff during the hearing. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the hearing then and move into the meeting. Similar to the last case, pretty straightforward extension. Seems like a reasonable request to me, especially for the first time around. Anybody have any other comments or questions they want to make during the meeting? Okay, hearing none, welcome motion, Mr. Weber.
yes. New business number 5, site plan located at 35 Groton Road. That it meets NRO 190, 146D and 190, 23F. With the one condition, all prior conditions of approval incorporated herein are made part of this plan, unless otherwise determined by the planning board. So approval.
So we have that motion by Mr. Weber to approve new business number 5. Do we have a second?
second,
Second by Mr. Peterson. Any further discussion? Can we get a roll vote on that, please?
Mike Peterson,
Yeah, yes.
Scott Leclair,
Yes.
Adam Farley,
Yes.
Ed Weber,
Yes.
Dan Hudson,
Yes.
Maggie Harper,
yes,
Bob Ballinger,
Yes.
Larry Hirsch.
Yes.
That motion passes 8-0.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. New business site plan, case number 6, Pennachuck Waterworks, Inc. owner, GSSG New Hampshire LLC applicant. This is an application and acceptance of proposed site plan to show proposed solar array project along with associated site improvements. This property is located at L Ferry Road, L Westland Avenue, L Stanwood Drive, L Apador Street, L Marlborough Street, L Independence Ave, and L Clarendon Ave. Has anybody had a chance to take a look at this application and want to make a motion as to whether it's ready for us to take jurisdiction?
So moved to take jurisdiction of new business number 6, site plan.
Okay, so we have that motion by Mr. Weber to take jurisdiction of new business number 6. Do we have a second?
Second,
Second by Mr. Peterson. Any further discussion? Can we get a roll vote on the jurisdiction?
Mike Peterson,
yes.
Scott Leclair,
Yes.
Adam Farley,
Yes.
Ed Weber,
Yes.
Dan Hudson,
Yes.
Maggie Harper,
yes,
Bob Ballinger,
Yes.
Larry Hirsch,
Yes.
and that motion passes 8-0.
Okay, so do we have someone from the applicant who wants to present this?
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Again, for the record, my name is Tom Zajac. I'm a civil engineer with Hayner Swanson, 3 Congress Street here in Nashua, representing GSSG New Hampshire LLC. Also tonight is Michael Redding from New England Solar Garden, as well as Don Ware from Pennachuck Waterworks. We're here tonight seeking a site plan approval for a proposed solar array off of Old Harris Road. We'd like to provide a brief presentation, after which we'd be happy to answer any questions from the public and or the board. Given that this is somewhat of a unique project, what I'd like to do is first take a step back and allow both Don and Michael to provide the board with some information about the projects, the benefit of solar, and New England Solar Garden's approach to projects like that. Following their presentations, then I'll jump back in and get into the meat and potatoes of the site plan application itself. So with that, Don?
Good evening. Don Ware, Chief Operating Officer of Pennachuck Waterworks. And I'm here tonight to give a short presentation on the proposed partnership and solar field that we are working on with New England Solar Garden that would be located on the property shown on our plans. Water utilities, wastewater utilities are among the largest consumers of power in the United States. And one of the things that the US EPA has been encouraging is sustainability in water utilities and seeking alternate, sources or ways to produce power. And one of the compatible uses that both the EPA and the AWWA has identified within watersheds where in an ideal world they are 100% forested is solar power. And why is that? Because the impact of solar power on our carbon footprint results in a great reduction of it if we can get our power through solar. The amount of reduction in CO2 far offsets. I think I had a number at one point, I don't remember it, the pounds of CO2 that are not being consumed because of the loss of the trees. The proposed solar field will provide roughly 3/4 of the power to 65 to 75% of the power that our water treatment plant in Nashua requires on an annual basis. And so again, a good opportunity for us. While the power from the solar field will not come directly to us, It will be going out into the grid. We have an opportunity to purchase it back from the grid at a discount as a partner in this project. And so, it's good in terms of meeting the goals and objectives of the EPA. It's good in terms of helping to control the cost and producing our water for our customers. So this is something we've been working on for a number of years. Timing has become critical. Originally, we had hoped to build the field ourselves, but because we cannot take advantage of the tax credits that are offered to private entities, because we are structured to produce no net income, we had to find a partner to work with us on this, which turned out to be New England Solar Garden. So we're pleased and hopeful this project can go forward. Mike will go over timing aspects of it, but hoping again it can be supportive. It will be one of the larger solar fields in New Hampshire, and again produce substantial amounts of power that will be green and renewable. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mike.
Good evening, everybody. Michael Redding with New England Solar Garden. New England Solar Garden has been in business for almost 10 years now. Our offices are over in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Our focus has been largely on small commercial array projects in New Hampshire and Maine. We've got a few in Massachusetts as well. And these projects range from 1 megawatt up to about 5 megawatts. And from a size perspective, that's somewhere between 5 and 25 acres of land needed. Just to give a little bit of background on the applicant is GSSG New Hampshire. So New England Solar Garden is the local developer. What we do is we work very closely with the landowners and the community partners to bring renewable energy to New Hampshire. We then have a group of investors that essentially are very committed to supporting these projects. And so the asset will ultimately be owned by GSSG New Hampshire. Thus, that's why they're the applicant for tonight. But I'm here to speak on their behalf and can answer any questions for them. Again, we talked about kind of our local presence. We are pretty excited about this year, considering all of the challenges that COVID had presented to many development projects. We have been successful in bringing 7 projects online or almost online. We're certainly getting close to finishing the construction this year. We're in the communities of Pittsfield, Franklin, Goffstown, and Conway. And then we've got 6 more planned for construction next year. We also are actively designing and permitting over 30 projects throughout New Hampshire and Maine that will ultimately come online in somewhere in the next 3 to 5 years. So with the expected time frame of the construction for the 13 projects, this will be generating about this time next year, we'll be generating enough renewable power to power about 5,000 homes in New Hampshire. So very excited to be able to do that. And considering all of the challenges that we have in New Hampshire as far as a small net metering program, but we're still able to make it work and be very successful for our communities that we're in. Certainly, there are many benefits to solar. I think the memo that Adora Brown, the Nashua's energy manager, put together, I think hits on some of the big highlights. Certainly, decarbonizing our electric grid is a real key and important aspect that solar can contribute towards. The net metering program here in New Hampshire also allows us to build a solar powered or create solar power and then let those that aren't able to build it themselves benefit, just as Don had provided in his introduction. We can do this for residents, we can do this for municipalities, we can do this for large and small businesses, and that's one of the things that we try to focus on is bringing that power to New Hampshire and to benefit folks in our communities. And typically we can provide cheaper electricity for a 20-year window. So we like to be able to kind of gloat a little bit on that as we read the headlines about coal and natural gas becoming more expensive than solar to operate. So we're pretty excited about the future. For this project, we're looking at a 1.75 megawatt AC fixed tilt array. Tom, if you wouldn't mind just sharing the picture of the of that array. So this is a typical picture of a fixed tilt array. You've got two panels in what we call portrait. So they're long, you know, kind of like if you just like the way you would look at a piece of paper. So portrait is the length is the up and down, and the short width is the left to the right. These are configured in an east to west direction, so always facing south. There are other types of array systems out there that track with the sun, and those are positioned north to south. This is a fixed tilt. It'll have a 25-degree face. It'll be constructed on steel posts and steel racking, and all of that gets grounded and put together correctly through our certified electricians. The construction for solar is remarkably simple, and it's very quick. We don't require any formal or significant foundation systems for our array. We can drive these C-channel or I-channel beams into the ground 4 to 7 feet deep. That provides a resistance for pullout, and it gives us the stability as well for the loads of wind and snow on the foundation. So once the trees are cleared and the ground is you know, kind of manipulated slightly, we try not to do too much grading. We like to work with the land and minimize our impact on the land and allow the kind of the natural vegetation to grow back quickly. So we try to minimize our grading. And then that allows us to get quickly in here and install these posts. If you would flip to the next picture. This is a project that we've got actively going on in Pittsfield. You can see here how the posts get put in, then the supports get put in, and the racking beams get put in, and then the panels get laid on top. And so once this happens, then typically we're hydroseeding the ground and starting to get the grass to grow. And at this point, all the kind of the heavy equipment goes away, and realistically, there's not a lot of heavy equipment. It's mostly skid steers and, you know, ATV forklifts and things like that. But once this gets completed here, then the electricians come in, and we've got many, many wires to run. And so the configuration of that will run in between rows. We couple certain groups of panels together, and they all tie back to an inverter. And then the inverter converts over to a transformer pad, which then gets it back onto the grid. So we're transforming the electricity from DC to AC, and then we're right sizing the voltage and making sure that it meets the sequence that's on the grid, the 60 hertz cycle that needs to happen in order for it to get back onto the grid. So again, all of this moves pretty quickly. This is a 1 megawatt project in Pittsfield, and we got through the majority of work in about 2 to 3 months. So we would be hoping to start this project, if the board gives us an approval, sometime in April or May of next year. And again, with our tree removal, again, we try to minimize our disturbance because ultimately we want to get back to a meadow-like condition. One of our goals is to try to really minimize our impacts and try to get to kind of a net zero impact. We know that, by bringing solar onto the grid and displacing coal and natural gas, that we're a net positive with regards to the tree removal, that we actually are offsetting carbon, even though we're removing trees to install the array. And so the other aspect that we know that we can be impactful on is habitat. And so creating this meadow surface and letting it grow up with the natural vegetation, and you can see that here, and then letting that get tall. This will grow to a good 2 to 3 feet before we cut it down. And that provides great protection for some of the smaller mammals and reptiles that like to live in meadows. Meadows are really sparse in New Hampshire. It's a habitat that was once here, but has since disappeared. And so it's actually a good opportunity that solar can provide this type of habitat. We also have a 100-foot shade management zone that's on the outside of the array. And what this does is it provides us the protection from shading on the panels. But in this area, we're trimming the trees down close to the ground surface, but we're not stumping, we're not removing any of the existing vegetation. We let it grow back. And we also use this area for some of the habitat supplement practices that we've recently implemented. We've been working very closely with New Hampshire Fish and Game to identify how we can be supporters for habitat and again, try to get towards that net zero impact. We install log heaps and stone piles, which can act as hibernacula for certain species like turtles, like fox. And so these are really important species for us because they balance out the kind of ecology and the habitat that we create by putting a fence around this array. And if we don't allow for the habitat and the wildlife to pass through it effectively, and all varieties, then we're kind of making a resort for birds and small animals like chipmunks. And we've had cases where it kind of gets very overgrown and we're constantly maintaining the bird nests that are trying to, nest underneath our array. By introducing the fox and the raccoon and some other smaller mammals, we really find that it takes care of itself and it gets back to kind of a more balanced habitat that was once there. So we definitely see that evidence. And like I said, we work very closely with Fish and Game to try to optimize those opportunities. For non-farm fields, which is the case here with the Pennachuck Solar site, we look to use a mixture of grasses, but also flowering pollinators to support the bees as well as the pollinator insects that are real critical for our environment. We mentioned about the fox is really our ally. We use a knot wire fence, which is like a 4x4 wire fence. You've seen them at orchards. Tom, if you could just show that real quick. Yes, they're very common at orchards. And we like to use the wood posts in the farm applications where we're more closer to the street. And it makes it a more rural kind of character with our appearance. But the important thing here is the size of this opening. A 4x4 or a 6x6 opening, and then cutouts every 50 feet that are 8 inches by 12 inches provide for the passage that I talked about, specifically for the fox with the larger opening, but also turtles and snakes and some of the smaller mammals that can make it through this fencing. But it still is very strong. It's designed to keep moose and deer out for the orchards. So it's got its reputation of being very effective. So we like to use this fence and we're planning to use it on more of the northern and the north, west and east sides of the array area. There's an existing chain link fence that runs along Old Harris that we'll probably maintain or reuse in our configuration. That pretty much summarizes our approach and our design tactics. Again, we try to be as accommodating for our impacts and try to be as much of a community partner as we can. There's lots more detail that I know Tom's going to dive into, so I'll turn it back to him so he can get to the engineering of things.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Michael and Don again. Tom Zajac with Hayner Swanson. Given that it's a unique, an exciting project, I thought that both Don and Michael could offer both the board and anybody else listening on the call a little bit of insight on, why this is happening, what's the background information, and what are some of the benefits of solar and some of the design considerations that we've made and New England Solar Garden makes on all their projects to kind of really reduce their impact and their footprint. And so I may rehash some of the stuff that Michael said, but I'll kind of get into a little bit more of the meat and potatoes about the application and the land itself. The existing site, as I'll describe in a second, has some unique characteristics to it. So I'll give a brief presentation and then open it up to questions. So. As shown on the plan here, the proposed solar site is in a 14-acre area where my cursor is here. It's really in the southeastern portion of what is a larger parent track and subject site. So the overall site, lot 118, as it exists today, is about 125 acre lot. And it contains the subject site, but it also contains a Pennachuck treatment facility and has frontage all the way over to Concord Street. We've got Supply Pond to our north, along with Pennachuck Brook and Harris Pond. We've got a large portion of undeveloped watershed land, which is a mix of both upland and wetland forested areas. And then, of course, we've got a large amount of frontage on Manchester Street, going all the way up to the town line. There's a number of residential properties along Manchester Street. And of course, the Ferry Street, Old Harris Road intersection. You're familiar with that site based on the last presentation, Pennachuck Middle School. And finally, directly abutting the site to the east is the Pennachuck Water Tank and the Hayden Green residential condominium development. So I'm going to zoom in for a second and discuss that along with the 125 acre site, there's also a portion of the site that exists today as 18 lots and associated paper streets off of Old Harris Road here that runs east-west. And these lots and the paper streets were created back in the late 1800s as part of a subdivision plan in this area. Obviously, the paper streets and the lots associated with it were developed. So 16 of the 18 lots are currently owned by Pennachuck. There are 2 remaining lots, lot 5 to the westerly part of the site where my cursor is here, and lot 88 in the easterly part of the site here, which are owned by private parties. Now, both Pennachuck and New England Solar Garden have been in discussions with both those property owners to various degrees interested in purchasing those properties. For various reasons, they have not been successful to date in acquiring those properties. So we're moving forward with the project in respecting those properties, and those properties will remain as this project moves forward. The subject site is located in the R18 zone. We've got numerous buffers and setbacks associated with Supply Pond and the watershed land and wetlands. The site is located within the City of Nashua Water Supply Protection Overlay. And with that brings 300-foot conservation areas, conservation zones from Supply Pond, and 150-foot setbacks from the associated wetlands. So there's a number of buffers and critical areas and really restrictions on the property. The existing site is wooded, but I will note that it's really a tree farm, not an old growth forest. So by our estimation, the oldest trees are about 60 years old within this 14-acre area of the property. And it was slated for some selective tree clearing within the last year or so in accordance with Pennachuck's 10-year forest management plan, which is on file with the National Conservation Commission. I believe that forest management plan runs from 2014 to 2024. But of course, they held off on that tree clearing in this area of the property based on the prospects of this project moving forward. Topography of the site is mild to moderate and slopes from the easterly portion of the site west towards the wetlands associated with Supply Pond. And we've done site-specific mapping, soil mapping on the site, and we found that the site predominantly contains well-drained sandy soils. So let me just jump for a second. I've got a rendered plan here. So here's what we're proposing here tonight. 2 solar array fields will be located on a total of about 12 acres. It's the area shown in green here. The 2 solar fields will be divided into two separate areas. Solar array uses are allowed in not only this zone, but every zone here in New England Solar Garden will operate the site long-term lease with Penachuk, so Penachuk will remain the property owners for this site. And the existing lots and paper streets will be consolidated by Penachuk prior to construction via a voluntary merger process. So if the board has questions about the specifics of how we're getting from point A to point B, I'd be happy to go into that in detail. But essentially, using the existing lot lines that are out there now, we are really dividing the site into two parcels. The parcel to the east will be known as New Lot 65. You can see here we are excluding Lot 88 and a small portion of the paper street known as Marble Street that's associated with it. That will remain. And this New Lot 65 is about 6.7 acres. The remainder of the property, including the private streets on the westerly portion of the site, will be absorbed by the parent tract, Lot 118, and that new lot will measure about 130 acres. So as I mentioned, the majority of the existing paper streets will be eliminated with the exception of short sections of Westland Street on the westerly side of the site, which will continue to provide access to Lot 5. And on the westerly side, easterly side of the site, Marlborough Street, which will provide access to Lot 88. These sections will remain to ensure that private access rights for the remaining two internal lot owners will remain. So as Michael mentioned, the design of a solar array sites like this are based on careful consideration of site constraints and the minimizing of environmental impact. So despite the number of wetland and wetland buffers we have on site, we have avoided any wetland or wetland buffer impacts. We're trying very hard to minimize our land disturbance and our footprint to utilize the existing topography as much as we can, as well as favorable soils and existing drainage patterns of the site. The project will maintain access off of Old Harris Road, which, as gains access at the Ferry Road, Manchester Street, Penachuk Middle School site driveway. There's an existing fence and gate located in this location here to the west. Old Harris Road, as it exists today, is a little bit of a winding gravel road ranging between 12 to 16 feet wide. The existing gate near the middle school will remain in that location. We have reviewed our access and our proposed plan here with the fire department, and they were okay with what we were proposing from a life safety access and life safety access point of view. In fact, they assigned the site an address of 200 Old Harris Road. We are proposing two sections of short gravel drives, again, along those paper streets to provide access into the solar array itself. And the two transformers. So there'll be two transformers, one in this location here where my cursor is for the westerly array, and one here where my cursor is for the easterly array. And we are proposing a new underground electric service that will run from this location here at the easterly transformer. Will run along and in Old Harris Road on the very northerly portion and run all the way out to Manchester Street, where we're proposing a number of utility poles and overhead services. And this is where that electric power will then tie back into the grid, as Don and Michael had referenced. You can see that we're sitting back considerably from the site. Just to give you an idea, from the first gravel drive to Manchester Street is about 1,200 feet. So the solar array will sit back considerably from the street and won't be visible from either Manchester Street or really any of the public ways in that area aside from Old Harris Road. Michael mentioned the two fencing types. So We've got fencing around the entire perimeter of the array, as well as fencing going down the middle of the array. The outside fencing that will face Old Harris Road to the south and a portion along the Hayden Green property to the east. That will be your typical chain link fence as you would see out there now. And as Michael mentioned, in the rear of the site, along where we front right up against the remaining watershed land, we're proposing the wildlife friendly knot wire fence. I think Mike spoke eloquently about the images there, and I'd be happy to answer any questions about the knot wire fence proposed for the rear and non-front facing areas of the site. The project team has been in communication with the remaining two lot owners in this location. Again, those lots are unimproved. The entire site is currently forested. And New England Solar Garden is working with them on establishing a formal agreement to go ahead and clear and stump those lots as part of this project. And those lot owners would be compensated for that clearing. The project does include some proposed impacts to the conservation zone. Again, these are 150-foot and 300-foot buffers that are associated with the Water Supply Protection Overlay District. There are really two areas where we're impacting. One, there's a very small section of Old Harris Road that exists within a 150-foot conservation zone associated with this wetland here. So really the impact there would be along the existing gravel drive. Again, we're installing a new underground electric conduit there. It's really a disturbance of an already disturbed area of the site. It's about 0.4 acres would be the disturbance in that area. The bigger impact to the conservation zone is what Michael called the shade management zone, or it's really over clearing outside of the perimeter fence. So if you follow my cursor on the screen heading north and then east, that's where the limit of the proposed fence is going to be. And this slightly darker shade around the site, we're proposing to clear that area but not stump it. So it'll be an initial clearing that will provide some fall protection for the panels, as well as maximizing sun exposure based on our southerly orientation. And just to give you an idea, we're clearing in between the 150-foot conservation zone and the 75-foot prime wetland setback. So we're not impacting the buffer in that area. Again, that area will be allowed to regrow after the initial clearing. And earlier this summer, we were successful in receiving a favorable recommendation from the Conservation Commission and a special exception from the Zoning Board to allow these conservation zone impacts. Mr. Chair, there are a couple project elements that I'd just like to discuss real quick and maybe try to head off some of the questions from either the board or the abutters. Sure. First is the current status of both Old Harris Road and the paper streets. So we received a comment from the engineering department related to the status of Old Harris Road. It has been shown historically on plans as in terms of our office as status unknown. And also I'll speak to the paper streets as well. So based on discussions with the project attorney and project team, it is our understanding that this portion of Old Harris Road from Manchester Street to the end just past our solar array is public, and that the various paper streets that I had shown throughout the site are private and no public rights currently exist. So what we've agreed to is that the project attorney is in the process of preparing a formal legal opinion, which will be submitted both to the engineering department and a corporation counsel for review and concurrence. And in fact, corporation counsel has already confirmed, based on earlier communication with attorney Nick Frasca, who is the project attorney, that the various paper streets involved with this project are indeed private, and there's no public street discontinuance needed. And I won't get into the weeds there on how and why it is. I'll leave it to the forthcoming legal opinion and review by various city departments. Second item is the environmentally friendly design. So as I mentioned, we're located within the water supply protection district within the watershed. So we've tried hard to avoid, and we're successful in any wetland or buffer impacts, avoiding any impacts to the various buffers that exist on the site, impacts in critical areas, including the shoreline protection buffer associated with Supply Pond, which is just to the north and northeast of the site. There was a wildlife habitat assessment study done as part of the New Hampshire DES alteration of terrain permit application. We've got wildlife friendly fencing and the friendly pollinator grass seed mixes throughout the site. And as Michael mentioned, and as shown on the site plan, there are a number of habitat creation areas proposed within that shade management zone. So outside of our fencing area, there are some habitat creation areas which will aid in promoting wildlife and wildlife through and around the site. Lastly, Mr. Chair, given that we are in the water supply protection zone, I do want to speak to stormwater very briefly. Our goal here, as with all projects, is to utilize the existing topography and favorable soil conditions to promote recharge throughout the site and, of course, maintain existing drainage patterns. As Don mentioned, the AWWA considers solar array a compatible use and a clean use within watersheds. There's a certain science to solar arrays in terms of the positioning and orientation of the panels themselves to minimize runoff erosion, and we've done that here. There are a number of low impact development BMPs proposed. Specifically, there is a large cutoff infiltration trench located along the entire westerly side of the site. So really the vast majority of this site is going to sheet flow in the westerly direction. And any runoff that does not go into the ground in the well-drained soils on its way there will be captured by that infiltration swale and recharged back into the ground. There are also are a couple leaching catch basins in and around an existing low point that exists on the easterly portion of the site. So as our stormwater analysis demonstrated, the project will result in a mimicking or improving of existing drainage conditions, which can be summed up by saying there's little to no runoff leaving the site, both in the existing and in the proposed condition. So in addition to the review by the engineering department, the stormwater design and study is subject to New Hampshire DES review as part of the alteration of terrain permit application. And those include very solar specific guidelines and criteria that we need to meet from a stormwater and erosion control perspective. Mr. Chair, we did have one waiver request associated with this project. My letter dated October 28th, 2020, looking for a waiver of section 190-279 EE, which is a requirement to show existing conditions on the site. I'll paraphrase that very briefly. As shown on the master plan, it's an extremely large site with a number of abutters that are located very far away from where we're actually proposing any work. Our survey and our design is to cover the area that we're working with to provide both reviewers and the construction team ample information about where the site is. So we don't see any benefit to providing existing conditions information on the remainder of the 137 acre site, as well as a number of abutting properties abutting this site. So in closing, we believe the proposed project is being developed in a responsible manner and in accordance with the National Land Use Code. We think this is a great opportunity to further both Pennachuck's goal of becoming a more sustainable utility, as well as the city's goal of becoming one of the leaders in New Hampshire when it comes to solar and renewable energy. We have reviewed the staff report and are okay with the suggested conditions of approval. One comment is I do want to point out that the engineering comments, which were issued this past Monday, we've actually had a chance to review those and quickly revise and resubmit our plans and the stormwater study to address those comments. Those are waiting and ready to go for staff to review after this meeting. We did not expect those plans to be provided to the board or to staff. Obviously, there was not enough time to that, but we thought it was important to go ahead and make that effort this week, to show that we're confident that we're able to solve those remaining engineering comments. And lastly, Mr. Chair, in keeping with New England Solar Garden's proactive approach to these type of projects, we have been in communication with our most direct abutters, which are the Hayden Green development to our east, including attending 2 meetings so far with their board to introduce the project and answer any questions that they may have. Our initial discussions with them have certainly been positive. They've, as a board, have indicated general support for the project. And so we're going to keep those communication lines open, and there'll likely be formal agreements between New England Solar Garden and the condo board as it relates to selective tree clearing, screening, and any plantings along that common property line. And we're certainly going to continue to work with them. I understand we received a couple letters of residents there. So I'd be happy to answer any outstanding questions from them that I didn't already, or Michael or Don cover in our presentation. So thank you, Mr. Chair. That concludes our formal presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the presentation. So I guess I don't have too many questions. I just for reference, so that sort of edge of the, I guess it's the east edge of the site, the distance between it and condo association, like the buildings on the condo association, how far is that roughly? We're just estimating.
So as you can see, this is the Hayden Green development here. This family detached units in a condominium form of ownership. This is the nearest unit here. That's actually where the president of the condominium board lives. So it's about 200 feet here to the nearest panel and about 150 feet to the nearest fence line. There's an existing fence line out there now that this fence here will be removed and reconstructed in place. And the existing buffer in this location is about ranges from about 30 feet to 100 plus feet in this location. And there is, if you've been out there, there is a pretty good topography in that if you're standing here on Furnival in the street and you're looking, there's really a high point that comes down from the water tank and our property breaks back away. So there's almost a natural berm located in this that really helps or will help hide the solar panels from the Hayden Green viewpoint.
Okay. Other questions for the applicant by the board?
Mr. Chair.
Yep, Mr. Bollinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, are there any known adverse effects just with regard to solar glare or things like that? I'm just trying to think of if there's any concern of the neighborhood. I didn't know, what type of reflection that the surface of the panels would give off. If anyone on the applicant's team would be able to respond to that, I would appreciate it.
Sure, I'll be happy to answer that. Michael Redding with New England Solar Garden. So glare was an issue back in the 80s and the 90s with a lot of solar panels when they were first coming out. Since then, the manufacturers have done an incredible job to really just, develop the material science to get the glare to be very, very low. If you compare it to a window glare, it's something on the order of a 10% of what a window could create for a glare. So they're incorporating that in the glass that goes on the top. They're also configuring the metal in a way that is not shiny, and though it doesn't have the surfaces that would reflect the sun and create kind of a sharp glare that maybe you might see when a car parks in front of your window. Or I always had that happen to me when I had an office, and it was next to a bank, and they would show up to cash their checks, and it would just get that glare that would go right into your eye. So the solar industry has responded to that effectively, and so we're not seeing that as an issue anymore. And to further that point, the FAA requires us to go through an analysis to see if there's any sort of impact on flights through the glare. And we submit one for all of our applications, and we've done one for this one here too. And the FAA has never determined that there has been a hazard associated with glare from the panels.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, if I may ask another question?
Yep.
I think this one would probably go to Mr. Zajac. I think you may have addressed it generally. I think the primary comment from engineering staff that jumped out to me was with regard to right-of-way and ownership. I think it was their comment number 2. You feel that you have sufficient documentation with regard to ownership issues and paper street issues that would satisfy engineering comment number 2?
Yeah, again, this is Tom Zajac. I'd be happy to answer that question. Yeah, doing this with the project attorney and project team. We feel we have a strong case that this is a public way in looking at the historical uses of this roadway and right-of-way, along with looking at the RSA. That's really for the project attorney to lay out the specifics of that case, and of course, we'll look to the city engineer's office and corporation counsel to confirm that approach is correct.
Okay, thank you. And I will ask one quick follow-up to that. If it is determined that Old Harris Road is in fact public, there's been a gate at the westerly end of Old Harris Road ever since I've lived in Nashua, and I didn't know if the gate affected the determination of public versus private and whether or not the gated access would continue if it were deemed public. I can't imagine folks would have a lot of need to go back there, but it would be obviously an exception to pretty much any public way where it's gated. So I would maybe to offer that at least for consideration. But if you have any thoughts on the gate or the history of the gate, that would be just food for thought moving forward as you try to make that determination.
Yeah, and my understanding is I don't know exactly when that gate was installed. Maybe Don could weigh in on that piece, but based on the evidence that I've seen, I am not an attorney, but it appears that that this road would meet some criteria for public use of the road prior to 1969, 20-year use of the road by the public. So there are a number of factors involved in that determination, as you know. But yes, we took that into consideration.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right.
The chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
I did have an opportunity to speak with Tom before the meeting, and I would like to recommend, should the board choose to proceed this evening, a 6th condition, and I'll read that at a later time in the meeting, covering the paper street matter. I do want to recommend that we have any kind of approval be conditioned upon the fact that both Corporation Counsel and the Division of Public Works have an opportunity to favorably review the opinion to be provided by the counsel of the applicant.
Okay, sure.
Question by Weber.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Weber.
The fencing that goes around it, is that going to have any kind of security so that curiosity doesn't get the better of human beings and want to go into this area?
So all the fencing will have, there will be gated access along the two paper streets to allow us to get into our array areas to be able to do maintenance. It also will afford the individuals access to their lots. All the gates will be locked and have a quick entry key system that can be used by police and fire in the event of an emergency. But it will be completely enclosed, and it will, not prevent access, essentially.
Okay. Second, I know technology, I know it's been around forever, and solar panels, but it's always upgrading. And to be able to receive more power with sensitivity, are the panels the most going to be used? Are the most up-to-date panels going around? I have, as far as I can go along 100% with that reflective stuff. At the Historical District Commission, we had panels that were neighbors were right next to it, and that was whether they were considered and concerned, and it would shine right up into their house if they were reflective. And so no, they weren't at all, and they didn't have any problem at all with the reflective. My sons have solar panels on their house, and they're no problem with them at all, and they're really happy with the solar panels that they have. So just that other question.
Yeah, absolutely. So as far as the kind of the purchase of the project, the group that is financing it will want to have the up-to-date, the most technology advanced, because it will only afford us the means to make the most amount of electricity that we can. Right now, the proposed wattage is a 400 watt bifacial Canadian solar panel. And so those are not built yet, but they are, well, actually, no, they are built. They are just not shipped yet, but they are in sequence to be produced and shipped to us. Essentially, we want to take advantage of all the latest technology. And so this bifacial panel is exciting because it will actually generate electricity from the backside. So whether it's during the wintertime where we've got a great amount of reflection off the ground, or if it's just in the summertime and you're still getting some, we're looking to generate as much electricity. And where this benefits us the most is when you get into the early and the late parts of the day. So when the sun isn't so high and it's not able to cast the right amount of intensity, we can still be producing close to the maximum capacity of the system by benefiting, by taking that bounce off the ground. So those are some of the benefits that we're hoping to gain from the new technology panels.
So I have one last question.
Sure.
Some time ago, they had concentrator panels. How did that actually go in the industry? It has nothing to do here, but I'm just saying, how did that work on the industry, the concentrator panels that were brought about?
Yeah, so the one that I know of is in Arizona, where it's basically like a big bowl, and there's a center column that concentrates the sun, almost like a laser beam or a tractor beam you'd see out of Star Wars. And so it is all based upon something like that with mirrors and reflection. That's a very specific project that generates a tremendous amount of electricity, but has a very unique footprint and something that would not benefit us up here. And really just because we don't have the sun.
The information.
Yeah. Yeah, we like talking about solar. I just don't want to bore everybody on it.
I'm not bored.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Mr. Barley.
I just had a quick question, I think, probably for Mr. Zajac, just to follow up on the paper streets issue and understanding that there's still the legal analysis to come on that. I just wanted to get a sense of, with the understanding that the position is and presumably would be confirmed by the legal opinion that the paper streets are in fact not public and so wouldn't need to be discontinued. Does that mean that you're anticipating that there would be easements between Pennachuck and those other private property owners with respect to that access?
Sure, yeah, I'd be happy to answer that. So in terms of the paper streets and whether they're public or not, as I referenced, that's already been confirmed by Corporation Counsel. We do have communication from earlier this year confirming that they are not public and therefore no discontinuance is needed there. So that has already been confirmed. In terms of access and easements, we're not doing anything with this project to restrict access for those lots. So if you zoom in, we are respecting a paper street. The underlying fee of each lot on each side of the road runs to the center line. So we've got fencing around that entire width of the paper street. So we would be respecting existing access rights for each one of those lots on the paper streets back out to Old Harris. And then of course, Old Harris is a public road. So those rights.
Okay.
Question, Hudson?
Mr. Hudson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just ask the applicant, while they're doing the research and the legal opinion, to also review that if Old Harris Road is determined to be a public right of way, what will be required for easements of the facilities that are going to be installed in that right of way. And should do those need to go to Board of Public Works, for instance, for approval? So, looking at the plan, I'm not an attorney either, so I'm very curious and interested to see the outcome of all that research. It seems like some roads are being maintained, some roads are being discontinued, and so I'm very interested to see what the outcome of that opinion is.
Okay. Other questions by the board?
Mr. Chair, Ms. Harper.
Go ahead, Ms. Harper.
Just a couple of questions. The first is in this particular contract, who is the responsible party for the maintenance of these solar panels?
So the asset owner will be GSSG New Hampshire. And then at some point, they may choose to sell it to another entity. At that point, that individual would be responsible. But in the current conditions, GSSG New Hampshire will take the responsibility of O&M. They will typically hire an entity to perform that as a service. And it comes out, it's very similar to like I could say almost like a snow plowing service where you just hire the individual, they know what to do, and they just manage it as if it's their own facility. There's folks that are really great at this, and that's what they're in the business of doing. So that's typically how it gets handled.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question or comment is, could someone speak to a little bit more about the abutters and what your conversations have been with them?
Just for clarification, are these the internal abutters or?
Yes, I'm sorry, the two lots.
Yeah. Michael, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. And if Don is still on, he can speak to it as well. So we recognize that we are abutters, and we wanted to understand how we might be able to work together with this project. I've reached out to both entities to try to understand if we could gain access to their lots to remove some trees. And so I have not been able to have any real conversation with either entity, though I've reached out several times. I know Pennachuck Waterworks had discussions with both entities early on to try to purchase the property. And as Tom alluded to, there was a few encumbrances on one lot, and then there just was just a non-agreement with regards to purchase on another one. So we weren't able to secure those. But that's, as far as I know, those are the only real conversations that we've had so far.
Okay, thank you.
Questions, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Mr. Peterson. Yeah.
I have a questions regarding the array itself. So this array has no storage capability. When the sun is gone, it's not producing electricity. Is that true?
Correct.
Okay. And then my other thing is the array produces DC, gets inverted into 60 cycle AC. And does that take place in one central place, or is it like all throughout the array being converted over to AC?
We're proposing to do that in two locations, and Tom can point to them with his cursor. Each array will have its own transformer and inverter pad. That'll be the first one, and then that'll be the second one there. They're pretty small in size. We're showing them as two separate pads, but you know, there'll either be two separate pads or there'll be one contiguous pad that will equal the same square footage that is represented here, and positioned side by side.
So if you have two pads, are they interchangeable? One could fill in for the other if one of them goes offline, so you'd always have a spare?
No, they're two separate units. So under the net metering rule, we're required to have kind of their own entities, own facilities. And so we even have our own meter pole down towards Manchester Street for that reason. So they're not linked at all.
Okay, and the electricity that's produced, does it go into the general power grid, or is it like used for the wastewater facility?
Yeah, it goes into the general power grid, and it'll go back to the substation that it's linked to. So the electrons really have no preference. They're going to go where the demand is. So I would imagine that we're going to actually be powering the school for quite a bit, even though the Pennachuck Waterworks will benefit on the price of the power and the fact that you know, that they're getting the green power purchase agreement.
Okay, and my last question is that today the planning board received a letter dated November 5th from Doria Brown. She is the City of Nashua Energy Manager. And in her letter, she said, this array produces enough to power 500 homes. But Mr. Redding, I think in your presentation, you said 5,000 homes. So that's what's the best number?
So my comment was in reference to this time next year when we have the 13 projects fully built in New Hampshire, we will be able to power 5,000 homes. This is one of those 13 projects, essentially a tenth of it.
So when the energy manager says 500, she's only talking about this project.
Correct.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. That's all for me. Thank you.
Great. Other questions by the board of the applicant? Okay. Hearing none, at this point, I would open it up to, is there anybody in the audience wishing to speak in opposition or concern or have a question of the plan? And maybe Mr. Zajac, you can stop sharing for a minute too. Just so I can.
Jim Pyle, question.
Go ahead, Jim. State your name and address for the record, please.
Jim Pyle, 14 Elliston Circle, which is part of the Hayden Green condominiums. The first comment is I'm definitely in favor of solar energy. I requested permission to put it on my own condo, but was denied permission by the condominium board. And the reason stated is they believe fire safety was an issue, and they were told fire safety was an issue, and they thought solar would lower property values. So I'd like to hear, and the third reason was aesthetics. They didn't think it looked very pretty. So I would like to hear if there is any evidence that solar panels does indeed or does not lower property value and also fire safety. If having solar panels, is that going to negatively, will the fire department put out fires where there are solar panels?
Okay. Well, we try to hold the questions and collect them all and then have the applicant go after them. I'm sure Mr. Zajak's writing them down, so.
They were submitted by email, so he should have.
Okay, great. Anybody else wishing to speak in opposition or concern? I have a question.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead and state your name and address for the record.
Joan Ashley, 8 Elliston Circle.
Okay.
First question is, will the only access for construction be from Harris Road, or will there be any access from the road around the water tank, the existing road?
Okay.
Second question, what kind of noise impact will there be during installation? I heard the list of equipment you were going to use. Is how much and how long will there be noise? I'm assuming based on the land here, you're not going to hit ledge, so you're presuming you're not going to have to drill in any of those pilings, but I assume they've done some kind of soil survey to be sure of that.
Okay.
Let's see. Will there be any lighting there at night? And is there going to be any EMI or other kinds of emissions from the site? We already have essentially no radio and television reception. I'm wondering if what little we have will be gone. And the other question I had, you mentioned, the engineer mentioned a berm, which from the Furnival end provided a block of the panels. At our end, we're quite a bit higher. Will we see the panels from up on the Elliston end?
Okay. All right. Other
And
questions?
I assume that the entire perimeters, someone asked about people getting in, curiosity seekers. I presume that the entire perimeter, wherever it may be, will have barbed wire as the current perimeter does, at the top of the fence. Is that going to be true with the new fence they put down at the end of Furnival, for example? That's it.
That. Okay, thanks. Anybody else wishing to speak in opposition or concern or have a question? Okay. All right. If not, I will ask the applicant to maybe address some of the questions that came up here. I took a list of them, but why don't you go down your list first and I'll remind you if you missed one.
Sure. Yeah, this is Tom Zajac. I'll try to hit I think about half of them I can answer, and then I'll turn things over to Michael to hit half. So Michael can circle back on Mr. Pyle's question about solar in terms of fire safety, property values as it pertains to our array. I don't know if we can speak to the fire safety and property values of installing them on individual residential homes. It sounds like the concern from the condo board was more related to installing panels on those single family detached units. So Michael, if you could weigh in on that. Mr. Pyle also submitted a letter. I addressed most of his comments. I think Michael went through the environmental benefits of solar and some of those comments, as well as where the electricity goes from the array and what local residents and businesses do. So if we missed any of those, he had a number of comments. I hope our presentation answered a lot of them, and maybe Michael can jump back. Or Michael, if you want to jump in now to speak to that comment before I jump into the other comments.
Sorry, I lost track. I was looking something up. Go ahead.
Sorry, his comments were related to fire safety and property values. And I really think they pertain more to maybe solar panels or fire safety on those on a residential home.
Right, right. So for a large solar array facility like ours, fire safety is certainly something that we're very concerned about. All of the equipment is bonded and grounded to allow the electricity to dissipate in the event of some sort of strike. Say there was a hurricane that drove some sort of someone's umbrella from the 55 plus community, made it up over the fence and landed into our array, damaging a panel. The equipment is designed to essentially kind of bunker down in place. There is a what they call a recloser that is positioned on one of the poles that immediately would turn off and prevent the electricity from surging and getting into the grid. The transformer would obviously trip, and as well as the inverter. And so then the power, any power that's being generated at that time essentially is grounded. And so it affords the means to prevent any further issues with regards to that strike. With the way that the way that it's situated, in talking with most fire marshals, and the way that the NFPA would like us to manage our facility is to keep things cleared, which we're doing, to try to minimize the grass growth to a certain degree. And certainly, like everything, when we have drought conditions, there's always the susceptibility for a forest fire. So we provide sufficient access for the fire department to come in with their firefighting equipment, engines to be able to have the means to get to the facility, to bring the water there, as well as to access the entire perimeter of the facility. So we provide all of those means in accordance with the National Fire Protection Act. And we've already spoken with the fire chief to concur that we're meeting their expectations as well. As far as property values go, this has been a big topic. A lot of states are very concerned about this. The two states that were most concerned was Massachusetts and Texas, because with the changes in their net metering rule, it basically created a solar gold rush, and folks were coming in from all over the country to build new solar, and folks were getting very concerned about its impact on property values. What they found for the most part is that property values weren't directly impacted. But I think it's really important to note that one of the things that was noted in the reports was that the real estate agents had made comments about marketability, and just because the solar array is not creating a decrease in the value of the properties around it, it may not be what everybody wants to see or be around. No different than being near a school or being in a big subdivision, or having an apartment building nearby, or even an ice cream shop for that matter. Everybody has kind of their own interests, and what sells a home is not always necessarily what you're abutting against to. Sometimes it has to do with whether it's got the right flooring or the cabinets that you like. Maybe it's a great school, maybe it's access to highway or amenities like movie theaters and malls. So it becomes a little bit in the eye of the holder and the buyer. But certainly solar can have an impact, and it certainly is not for everybody. The one thing that we have tried to do in all of our communities is to make ourselves as compatible with the environment. Where we have a view shed from the road, we incorporate screening, landscaping, as well as mesh screening to hide. We incorporate this rural knot wire fence with the wooden post to give it more of a rural character. And we don't have any lights. And so in many aspects, we've become a really good neighbor in that we're quiet and we're dark. And basically once we get it up and running, We really don't visit it very much. We monitor everything from the internet. And if there's something that needs to be fixed, we can send a technician out, which would be in a small van. And you barely know he'll be there. They'll be in and out before you know it. And so we find that our presence in the neighborhood is very inviting in some cases for folks who don't want a neighbor that brings lots of traffic or noise. We don't generate any noise. The inverters create a small hum, similar to like an air conditioner that a home would have on the outside. Roughly at 50 feet from that inverter, the hum is pretty, you can barely hear it at that point. So for all of those reasons, we found that we're a pretty good neighbor and that overall our marketability impact is minimal.
Okay. Anything on the EMI question?
I'm not very familiar with that. There's lots of things that can affect that, as you know. It's mostly about what you're emitting as far as a signal goes. All of our cabling is going to be underground. So that, I guess that would support that we wouldn't be emitting anything similar to like, say, like a distribution corridor that folks might have concerns about there being electricity being emitted in the air. Those large distribution corridors transmit a tremendous amount of voltage. And so there is some voltage that is in the air around it. But our voltage is not nearly that large, and it will be underground until it gets to the pole on Manchester Street. And then it's no different than what the electricity is that's currently there. The panels themselves, they absorb electricity. They don't emit anything. So again, there would be no impacts there. And then the equipment is all encased and insulated, the inverters and the transformers. So I don't anticipate that being a problem either. The only thing that, like I said, we may emit a signal to be able to read the equipment, in its status. That may be a cellular signal that we'll be emitting, but no different than what most folks are dealing with now. If you've got a repeater in your house, you're probably emitting the same signal that we would be submitting.
Okay.
So many other questions, Mr. Chair, if I could jump in.
Go ahead.
Regarding access, I know this was a important question with the condo board, is all access both during construction and for maintenance will occur via Old Harris Road and out to Manchester Street. So there'll be, there are some cart roads that would lead through the Pennachuck property, around the water tank, back out to Concord Street. Those are not going to be used both during construction and post-construction.
Okay.
I think Michael discussed noise after construction being minimal. He said within 50 feet, once you're outside of 50 feet, you can't hear those units. The nearest unit to those transformer and inverter pads is well over 400 feet. So there would be no noise impacts. During construction, I think early in his presentation, he referenced a project where the panels were up and running, ready for wiring within 2 to 3 months. So it should be a relatively quick process. If you've gone through the plans, we are proposing to phase this project and do one lot at a time. Again, that's to really minimize the land disturbance out there as best we can. So it should be a fairly quick process. All deep sandy soils out there, so there's no ledge, no blasting that's anticipated with the project. I just mentioned there's no lighting, so there'll be a good quiet, dark neighbor. Fully fenced around, both a combination of the chain link fence and the knot wire fence. I think the last question I had was the view from Hayden Green itself. So the road that I can pull up the plan if it would be helpful, but the road that was mentioned, Elliston Circle, is actually located between really the water tank and the panels themselves. If you look at the plan, it's about 600 feet as the crow flies, but there's quite a bit of topography changing there. And the water tank in the land sits up high with the Hayden Green and the solar panels low. So you will not be able to see the panels from that location, even looking around the water tank.
Just, was there barbed wire around the fence? Someone had a question about that, or was it just the not wire fence? Yeah.
Yeah, so the existing fence out there does have barbed wire. I believe the plan is to keep that in place on the chain link fence. Again, really that's a perimeter fence to Pennachuck's watershed land.
Got it.
That would be on Old Harris.
Okay. Okay. Those are the only questions I had written down. I guess I give the public, because there's only a couple of you, any further question on those? Mr. Pyle or Ashley, Miss Ashley, Mr. Pyle?
Question, will you be able to see the array from Route 3, Henry Burke Highway? Is it blocked by the high school, the junior high?
Yeah, I don't believe you will. There's going to be a stand of trees and vegetation that will remain on the southerly side of Old Harris Road, as well as the vegetation that exists along Henry Burke Highway. I know you can see through that vegetation down to the fields, but between the two and the topography of the land with the array is relatively flat. It's not like it's going to be on a massive hill where you're going to be able to see it sitting up high. So you'll likely see the tree clearing, but you won't see the panel.
Okay.
I have a little request for clarification. It sounds like it's about 2 to 3 months of construction. Did I understand that correctly? And I didn't really understand the amount of noise that the construction will generate. Could you clarify that, please? Thank you.
Sure. The major construction timeframe is about 2 to 3 months, where most of the activity will take place. For about 2 weeks, there'll be a small machine that will have a pile driver on it that will allow us to hammer the posts into the ground. This will create some noise. It will be not as loud as if you were listening to someone hammer rock, if you're familiar with that noise, but it'll be on the same line. They go very quick. They lay them down on the ground and they'll punch in a good, 300 posts in a day. And so about 2 to 3 weeks, they'll have them all put in, and then that noise will go away. The remaining noise will be kind of ratchet sounds, maybe, drill sounds, just activities, maybe some radios from the contractors, just, working, but they're, and there'll be some minor sounds of maybe a skid steer running around delivering equipment, but nothing, nothing out of the ordinary. Nothing excessive with regards to like blasting or major drilling sounds. And after the 3 months, there'll be some, landscaping activity. There'll be some wiring activity going on. Fencing will be going up. So there'll be just some activity and some minor noise associated with it. I would say that if you probably estimated a 6-month time frame from the day that they start clearing the trees. There'll be noise when they're clearing the trees, that's for sure. I forgot to mention that. And then, so that'll probably be like a 2-week process there. So probably a total of 4 weeks where you have kind of real noise that might be entering your neighborhood. But 6 months would be a good time frame to kind of anticipate just activity occurring at that site.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, and I assume you understand there'll be, your noise production has to be within the sort of timeframes of the city's noise ordinances and stuff like that, so.
Yes.
Okay. Other questions by the board of the applicant? Ms. Harper?
Just one question. Approximately how far away are the two pad sites from the two lots of the two abutters?
Yeah, it looks like just measuring quickly on the plan, looks to be around 50 or 60 feet there for the nearest one, and more in the 75 to 80 foot range for the westerly one along Westland Street. That one's a little farther away.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions by the board of the applicant, while we're still in the hearing? Okay. Any further questions for staff by the board during the hearing? Okay. Hearing none, I'm going to go ahead and close the hearing then and move on to the meeting. Okay. So, interesting project. Certainly one that has some significant environmental benefit, and seems like a site that does make some sense, and the applicant has spent what appears to me to be a considerable amount of effort in trying to make it compatible with the site. So I'm very interested in the project. Welcome anybody else's comments, questions on the board. Anyone? Okay. Not hearing any. Anybody willing to make a motion on this? Mr. Sullivan, you had something to add, right?
I just wanted to recommend an additional condition if the board is willing, should they choose to proceed.
Fill that out.
Sure. So I would recommend a condition number 6 that the applicant shall supply a legal opinion regarding the status of all paper streets shown on this proposed site plan and Old Harris Road to be favorably reviewed by Corporation Counsel and the Division of Public Works of the City of Nashua. And that would be prior to plan signature.
Reviewed by Corporation Counsel and DPW.
And Public Works. Yep, correct.
That's prior to permit?
I've suggested prior to plan signature because it's such an essential component of the proposed plan.
Yeah, okay, so prior to signature. All right. Anybody want to make a motion? See a few people writing. Mr. Varley?
Yeah, sorry, I was just writing down that new condition from Matt there. So yes, I would like to first of all just reiterate your comments, Mr. Chair, in terms of I think this is a really well thought through project, and I think has a lot of benefits for the city and beyond. So with that in mind, I would like to make a motion to approve new business number 6 site plan, finding that it does meet the requirements outlined in site plan NRO section 190-146D. And that would be with a total of 6 stipulations. The first stipulation is a waiver request with respect to section 190-279EE, requiring the showing of existing conditions. And that waiver request will read is granted, will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulation. Stipulation number 2, as written in the staff report. Stipulation number 3, and I'm just going to ask for Linda, what is remind me what the current date of the letter from engineering is here?
November 2nd.
Okay. So stipulation number 3 is prior to the chair signing a plan, all comments of the letter from Joe Mandola, street construction engineer dated November 2nd, 2020 shall be addressed to the satisfaction of the engineering department. Stipulations number 4 and 5 is written in the staff report. And then a new stipulation number 6, which shall read that prior to the plan signature, the applicant shall provide a legal opinion regarding the status of all paper streets on the property, as well as the status of Harris Road which the legal opinion will be subject to review, favorable review by Corporation Counsel and the Department of Public Works.
And did you want that submitted, I think we prior to plan signature?
Yes, no, sorry, I thought I'd said that.
Yeah, I might have missed it. Okay.
Just a second. It's Old Harris Road. Harris Road is down the street from me, so it's Old Harris Road.
Did you
Thank
clarify that, Mr.? Okay.
It's the Division of Public Works. It's a
Yep. Okay.
instead
We
of
got-
department.
Oh, okay, that's fine. We got those noted. So we got that motion to approve with the 6 stipulations as indicated by Mr. Barley. That clarification, it is the Division of Public Works by Mr. Hudson. Do we have a second on that?
Second.
Second by
Mr. Chair,
Uh,
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I just one quick item on condition number 3. I guess technically email instead of letter.
Yeah, I think they could go either way. It's-
Okay, that's
yeah.
fine. Just
Yep.
wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Yep, I think that's fine. Do we have a second? Yep, second by Mr. Weber. Any further discussion by anybody? Okay, can we get a roll vote on that?
Mike Peterson,
Yes.
Scott Leclaire,
Yes.
Adam Barley,
Yes.
Ed Weber,
Yes.
Dan Hudson,
Yes.
Maggie Harper,
Yes.
Bob Bollinger,
Yes.
Larry Hirsch.
Yes.
And that motion passes 8-0.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank
All
you,
right.
everybody.
Moving on, we have a couple more items of other business here. First is a review of tentative agenda to determine proposals of regional impact. So we have the technical review meeting November 2nd notes here. Has anybody had a chance to take a look at those? Want to make a motion as to whether there's any proposals of regional impact?
Weber.
Go ahead, Mr. Weber.
Noting that there is no regional impact of any new projects.
Okay, so we have that motion by Mr. Weber. There are no proposals of regional impact. Do we have a second on that?
Second.
Second by Ms. Harper. Any further discussion? Could we get a roll vote on that, please?
Mike Peterson,
Yes.
Scott Leclaire,
Yes.
Adam Barley,
Yes.
Ed Weber,
Yes.
Dan Hudson,
Yes.
Maggie Harper,
Yes.
Bob Bollinger,
Yes.
Larry Hirsch.
Yes.
That motion passes 8-0.
Great. Okay, moving on, we have the referral from the Board of Aldermen on the proposed O-20-034, which is going to extend the temporary adjustments to site plans to allow for greater outdoor seating at restaurants. So this is ordinance we've seen before. It looks to me to be like we're just extending it. Is that right, Matt?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. In conversations with both the building and the fire department, we determined that it would be appropriate to extend the existing ordinance up until the end of January 1 of 2022. We do believe there are feasible methods for existing permittees, of which there are 23, to extend their dining season into potentially even the winter and certainly through next summer months. So we are requesting a year extension to this, and if granted by the Board of Aldermen, we'll be doing outreach to the existing permittees and potentially adding some additional ones moving forward as well.
Great.
And again, this is on private property specifically.
Yep. Okay. All right. So any discussion on that? I mean, I think it's been a pretty big success so far as I can tell, and I certainly have used it quite frequently. Anybody else have any comments on that? Questions? Discussion? Anybody want to make a motion? Mr. Varley?
Mr. Chair, thank you. I would make a motion to convey a favorable recommendation on O-20-14 to the Board of Aldermen.
Okay, oh, okay, yeah, it is 14, right? I must have read so 34 in the agenda, but it's really 14. You have the correct language, yep. So we have that motion to convey a favorable recommendation to the Board of Aldermen on O-20-14.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm just realizing I read O-20. I think that was actually the original ordinance. So it is the O-20-034. Okay.
That is correct. I can confirm that. It's
It should be
34.
34. Okay. Anybody want to make a second on that? Mr. Ballinger?
Yes, I'll second. Thank you.
Okay, discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Sure, go ahead.
I do just want to clarify, the copy of the ordinance that we got does state O.20-14. It may be a moot point, but I don't know which one we're actually voting on, and it may matter.
So just for clarification, I believe the reference is under the whereas O-20-14. That's a reference to the existing ordinance that's being extended. Yeah. My understanding is that a new number is assigned for the extension of the ordinance as proposed. And I could be procedurally wrong on that, but that's my understanding of why this is now becoming O-34.
Right. If you look at the top right-hand corner,
correct
document, it says O-20-34.
Yeah,
okay.
On the back.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Thank you for your
Okay, I appreciate that. I wasn't trying to make a mountain out of a molehill there. I just wanted to make sure procedurally we were doing the proper thing. So thank you, Matt, for the clarification.
Great. Any other discussion? Can we get a roll vote on that?
Mike Peterson,
Yes.
Scott Leclaire,
Yes.
Adam Barley,
Yes.
Ed Weber,
Yes.
Dan Hudson,
Yes.
Maggie Harper,
Yes.
Bob Ballinger,
Yes.
Larry Hirsch.
Yes.
And that motion passes 8-0.
Thank you very much.
Next up, referral from the Board of Aldermen on proposed O-20-083. This is the authorization on the acquisition of property at 36 Buck Meadow Road. Does we have someone to talk on that?
Mr. Chair, I believe Alderman Dowd is here this evening to speak to this. I'm assuming based on his presence. I want to thank both he and Jamie for sticking with us through the agenda, obviously. And if Alderman Dowd does need assistance with showing the plans, I'm certainly happy to do that as well.
Sure.
Yeah, I stuck around because I thought there might be questions on this. This is for the access road to the new school site.
Right.
It's been negotiated with Attorney Bolton and the owners. They have approved and signed the purchase and sale already. It's been approved unanimously by the Joint Special School Building Committee. I don't know if you have the purchase and sale in front of you.
Yes, we actually do. Yep.
So if there are any questions, I can answer them. I don't know if they sent you the PowerPoint presentation that I did to the Board of Aldermen to help them understand the purchase and sale.
Alderman Dow, we did not include that in the planning board packet. We included only a locus map in the existing purchase and sale agreement.
But we've got a preliminary design on the road. We have letters from the police department and the fire department sort of pretty much insisting on a second access to the property. And from the planning department, they want us to use this as the primary access to the school. There'll be an emergency access from the corner of Cherrywood and Medallion for walkers or emergency vehicles if necessary. But this lot, and it's been, because of COVID, been in months of negotiations with the people that are selling it to us. They are anxious to sell it to us, and I think we have an outstanding agreement with them. But if there are any specific questions, I certainly can answer them.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I think back when the middle school came under the site plan review, I kind of remember some discussion about the potential for this. So this is connecting the middle school lot to Buck Meadow using the using that as a primary entrance essentially, right? So,
Yes, it will be designed, it will be a city street,
yeah.
designed to city street requirements. We're working with Division of Public Works and Harriman Associates. We've done all the soundings, we've done all of the any kind of test and requirement you can think of for the lot. So we're happy that we can move forward.
Yeah. Okay. I don't have any questions, but anybody else from the board have questions on this item? Mr. Bollinger?
Mr. Chair? Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm a little less familiar with the overall middle school plans. Maybe there was some further review prior to my time in joining the board, but
yeah,
I guess what I'm trying to understand, and I don't know if there's a simple overlay to put up. It looks like there's another parcel in between. The City JS site labels it as 44 Buck Meadow. I'm just trying to understand if there would be any further property negotiations necessary to traverse that property, or whether that's a purchase and sale, whether that's an easement. I guess I'm just trying to understand how access is fully obtained to the city-owned parcels further to the east. This is obviously what's before us tonight is a piece of that, but I guess I'm not understanding whether or not this is the final piece. And
Yes,
I don't know if anyone on staff or Alderman Dowd can provide any insight on that.
Sure.
I can tell you that we're in the planning process of negotiations for acquiring that piece of property, and again with Corporation Counsel, I can't get into the details of the acquisition because of the nature of any acquisition, but we do not see any problems acquiring that land to connect to our property.
But oh yes, Matt, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I would echo Alderman Dow's comments saying that obviously the proposed driveway layout does traverse that piece of property. So whether it be through an easement or acquisition or whatever the ultimate solution is, there will be some negotiation happening. As Alderman Dowd referenced, I did have an opportunity to speak to Division Director Marchand about this. She suggested that negotiations are active and that we should know more relatively shortly, but at this point, there's nothing formal to report to the board, but obviously there will need to be some agreement moving forward.
Mr. Chair, if I may ask a quick follow-up,
yep.
Are you able to give any indication as to whether that would be a sale of the full property, a sale of partial part of the property, or whether it would be easement, or all options on the table at this point? It just obviously you need something there. So I didn't know how the city was pursuing that. And again, I'm not asking you to get into the weeds of, but are you able to comment on whether we're going to buy the whole, it's a pretty considerable parcel. It's 27 acres. And
No, we are not acquiring that whole lot. We are acquiring just the piece we need for the road and allowing the owners to have access to their property. So that's what we're doing right now, getting the measurements, the meets and bounds of what we need for the city street, for the road. And that's what we'll be acquiring.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
You can't buy a big piece of land and sell house lots. They don't let us do that.
Any other questions or comments on that? Okay. Anybody want to make a motion? Mr. Weber? You're still on mute there, Mr. Weber.
Yeah. Thank you. I'd like to make a favorable recommendation for R-20-083 resolution to the acquisition of the property at 36 Buck Meadow Road.
Okay, so we have that motion for a favorable recommendation on R-20-083. Does anybody want to make a second on that?
Second.
Second by Mr. Peterson. Any further discussion? Could we get a roll vote on that, please?
Mike Peterson,
Yes.
Scott Leclaire,
Yes.
Adam Varley,
Yes.
Ed Weber,
Yes.
Dan Hudson,
Yes.
Maggie Harper,
Yes.
Bob Ballinger,
Yes.
Larry Hirsch.
Yes.
And that motion passes 8-0.
Okay, thanks. That's all we have on our formal agenda. Any discussion items by anybody? Mr.
Weber.
Yep.
Yes. I know this has come up before, but the packet, I couldn't even go look at any of this property because I got my packet today around 12 o'clock. We used to get them on Saturday. I'm just asking if that, I know we talked about this before, but it is necessary for us to be able to have enough time to really go visit these sites that we have. So I'm just asking if how long will it be before we can get our packets on? I get mine usually. I should get it on Saturday morning. I used to get it.
Yeah, I got mine quite a while ago. I didn't get it like yesterday. Did you?
I got mine today.
Oh no, I got mine like 3 days ago or something.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, yeah, that it was a couple of days ago. I don't know if there was something unfortunate that happened with Mr. Weber's. Mine is actually postmarked on the 30th. And I want to say I maybe got it on Monday. So Ed, I'm sorry if yours came late, but it looks like they were sent out on in a reasonable amount of time. So, but thanks for bringing that up, though. I know. No. Thank you for bringing that up. It's important if you didn't get it to mention that. So thank you.
Yeah, I've always gotten it like Saturdays before. I know COVID is a pain, but I used to get it always on Saturdays, and so now it's.
Must have been the big snowstorm. It's probably the big snowstorm delayed it.
Chris and Linda, am I correct? We did send out on Friday last week?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Weber. We'll look into that, but yeah, we did get it out.
If it happens again, if you don't get it by Monday, give us a call and we can always run one out to you.
Well, if we don't get it, it would be interesting to, as a backup, just if you can have a electronic will work for me.
Yeah, we've
talked about that. Yeah.
Yeah. If you can, just as a backup, so you don't have to, run out there and do it,
Okay.
You can always blame mail-in ballots. I don't know. Maybe that's
exactly.
I don't have any other discussion items. The only thing I'd remind everybody is to make sure you go to the Imagine Nashua website, and there's all the the kickoff meeting from tonight should be up there pretty soon, and there's some surveys up there that everybody can take, and you can kind of follow along that master plan project. You can get on the mailing list to kind of get all the updates, and so it's definitely worth going to that site and checking it out and keeping up with the master plan. So that's all I have. Anybody want to make a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
All right, so a motion to adjourn by Mr. Weber. Let's just get a roll vote on it.
Mike Peterson,
Yes.
Scott Leclaire,
Yes.
Adam Varley,
Yes.
Ed Weber,
Yes.
Dan Hudson,
Yes.
Maggie Harper,
Yes.
Bob Ballinger,
Yes.
Larry Hirsch.
Yes.
That motion passes 8-0.
Okay, we are adjourned at 9:58.